known as the jewel in the English crown, Cecil. And we've been going on with sugar for a very long time. Dominica was not really one of the main suppliers of sugar in the Caribbean. Sugar was basically coming from Antigua, Jamaica, Barbados, Ghana. But later on, we started depending, as we move forward, on different crops: vanilla, lime, coffee, citrus in grapefruit and oranges, and then we move on to bananas. And basically, you know what happened to bananas? We had a protective market in Britain, and we lost that market because we had competition from Chiquita and Dole in the United States. And so the preferential treatment which we had from England, we lost that. And so right now, we are basically hearing more of our CBI.
But before we even get right there, it's important that we give some kind of historical order of the banana industry, because when you say that we lost it, some persons might think it was yesterday. We know way back in the 80s, Dominica was thriving on the industry, but we saw in mid-90s, early 90s into the mid-90s, we saw the preferential treatment, we saw the competition of Dole and Chiquita in Central America, and how they were able to get their government to literally take us to court. When I say us, that's the OECS countries and that of the other Caribbean countries, especially the countries who dealt with sugarcane. And I think that's where I'm going to bring both Sam and Kenny to have that kind of discussion in terms of that kind of development that we would have seen what the banana industry was doing and where we are today. Kenny?
Well, if you start from the 80s, the history of Dominica and the agricultural industry, as you said, predates independence. Under Elrose and Company, lime was a dominant force for a small period of time before disease hit the crop. I mean, some Dominicans know, many Dominicans know, but some people still don't know that at one time Dominica was the largest producer of limes in the world. And part of that reason was that also we had less people in Dominica, so much of the estates covered places now that are basically settlements for housing, places like Goodwill, even all into Pottersville and parts of Roseau.
Bath Estate.
Bath Estate.
Soufriere, Scott said.
Exactly. If you take the history of Dominica as a way forward to look at how our economies has been built, agriculture has always played a huge role. But that was based on first Elrose having a dominant relationship with as a buyer of the commodity locally and then selling it into the global market or producing product from it. A lot of people don't know the basis of a lot of what was called Cadbury Schweppes, the tonic water, was limes from Dominica. But when you come into bananas, it was the same model repeated. It was one company essentially dominating the market and the farmers effectively supplying that one company yeast into the United Kingdom. One of the things that we have to note, and it has to be in context going forward, is that Dominica next to Jamaica, which is something that is still so to this day, had the largest number of peasant farmers in the Caribbean. Now, peasant farmers, when I say peasant, it's not in a discriminatory way to talk about poverty. It's really down to the landholding size. So when you had agricultural lots of 5 acres and less, that was denoted as peasant farming. So when the great estates broke up in both Jamaica and Dominica, they broke up into a lot of these small holdings. And that's very important to understand, because whilst you had one buyer for one commodity like limes and bananas, like Elrose and yeast, then all of the farmers would gravitate towards producing one crop. But as you can see, when that model disintegrates, then you've got a lot of different farmers who have free will to produce whatever they want, which then makes it very difficult for you to develop a macro industry. So that is something that is coming forward into how agriculture is being dealt with and all of the challenges we have now. That historically puts it in context. When we had one buyer, then it was relatively easy to be able to get farmers to dedicate themselves to planting one crop. One thing I want to put on before I pass on to my guy Sam, and I think a lot of people know about the demise of bananas, but there's an area that I'll talk about later on that I am particularly interested in. And during the 1980s, during the reign of the Freedom Party, when the banana industry was at its height, and that would be, I would say, between 1985 and 1988, the level of migration from Dominica was extremely high. In fact, between 1983, I believe, and 1980 and 1988, something like between 20 to 22,000 people left Dominica. And a lot of people say, well, if a country is doing economically well, you have the banana industry, why did that happen? And the context is pretty interesting, Sam, because we all know what happened in Grenada in the invasion, and the role that our prime minister then played in it, as well as some of the other prime ministers. And it's interesting because the migration from Jamaica under Seaga and Barbados under Tom Adams dovetails with Dominica in terms of being a peak at that time, quite simply because, as whether you to call it as a goodwill gesture, the Americans allowed more of our people to enter these countries, or to enter the United States, on the basis of having collaborated with them in that gesture. So there are things, when you're looking at the banana industry, there are things that we have to note going forward that is a phenomenon for our economy that is consistent. One last point I want to make with regards to the industry is that the story about
let's try to do less of the pounding of the desk.
Yeah, sorry. The story about the banana industry. There is something that is going to be repeated throughout as a macro model. Dominica, most of the Caribbean islands, we are regulated by economies which we are actually competing with to some level or the other. And that is always going to be a challenge going forward. And that's what happened in the banana industry. And Sam can tell you a bit about the tourism factor that entered. But with the banana industry, we entered a period of time where Chiquita Dole, and it's the guy who was the head of Chiquita Dole, an American businessman by the name of Carl Lintner. He astutely financed both the Democrat and the Republican parties. I mean, it's on record that he made donations of $1 million to both Bob Dole and to Bill Clinton's campaign. And it's also on record that as a good faith gesture, he slept in the Lincoln bedroom of the White House as a thank you, so to speak, based on the lobbying of that time. And Chiquita Dole managed to tell the rest of the world through the trade representative to the WTO, a guy called Mickey Cantor, who was sent by the U.S. government, to say that the Windward Islands Banana Association and what share that of the market that they had, the 2.5% of the global market that they had, was a threat to the 65% that Chiquita Dole had, which is kind of amusing when you think about it, but it changed our lives. So that's just a small snippet. I mean, it's the boring part of the discussion, so to speak.
And for sure, we'll get deeper into it, because it's important.
Yeah.
Now, Sam, from your perspective, in those early periods, we would have seen countries like Antigua, Barbados, Tortola, St. Thomas, would have focused quite a lot on the issue of tourism. But at the same time, these countries saw the economy growing through sugarcane. What do you make of that kind of change when they saw the movement of sugarcane into another economy.
Yeah. Well, one thing, going back
Get closer to the mic, Sam.
Yeah, going back to, can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me
Yes,
now? Okay,
yes.
good. So going to the bananas, certainly Dominica had a disproportionate dependence on bananas relative to even other banana producing Caribbean islands, because they had begun to transition to tourism. And what happened is, Jamaica is sort of the first island in the Caribbean to really develop a sort of mature tourism industry, along with Cuba further north. That's the early half of the 20th century. And if you can recall, in the late, in 1959, Fidel Castro took over Cuba, and in 60-61 he started to nationalize, foreign interests in Cuba, all the hotels. Cuba was a playground of the Caribbean. And that precipitated the interest of developers in developing hotels in other places in the Caribbean. And so they started looking for places they felt safe. And certainly when you look at places like St. Thomas, St. Croix, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and certainly the other islands, British islands, they felt more comfortable investing there because the colonial powers would protect their interests. And you saw further explosion of tourism in St. Thomas. I know people realize that the last sugar cane plantation on St. Croix shut down in 1967. They were producing sugar up until that time, and all the other islands, St. Kitts, Antigua, all those islands were transitioning from sugar into tourism at that time. And the brand of the Caribbean tourism at that time was sun and sea, yeah, and Dominica, sun, sea, and white sand. Mm-hmm. And Dominica being a volcanic island, islands are either formed by coral sedimentation or by volcanic eruption. Dominica, we know, hosts 9 of the 15 active volcanoes in the Caribbean region. Dominica was seen as not a place that's tourism friendly because it rains too much. It didn't have a place to build an airport, and it's too steep and so on. So there wasn't a lot of interest in Dominica, and there was interest in the other islands in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we found ourselves heavily dependent on limes, which the industry ended in 1980 with the advent of Hurricane David and Frederick, and at that time, Elrose and Company decided not to try to resuscitate the lime industry, and we became dependent on bananas. And as a result of that, we entered the 90s with, I think, maybe about 6,500, Kenny, small banana farms, 5 acres or less, and we had a system where people were actually emerging to the middle class with the banana trade in Dominica, and you say life was good on the bananas. And then all of a sudden, everything fell apart with the WTO ruling against the ACP countries. And so we found ourselves not only unable to compete with bananas, but with any other industry, really, pretty much, because we do not have the benefit of economies of scale. You have these large Latin American plantations, Ecuador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Panama, all these countries, where a single banana plantation is larger than the country of Dominica, and it's flat and it's mechanized. So without the trade support that we got as post-colonial assistance from the UK, Dominica was unable to compete in that and virtually anything else. And so now what do we do? And we come into the mid-90s with the advent of tourism. We did have some tourism businesses before that, but they were pretty small, yeah. And we certainly had, and it was always based around nature, and people recognized at the time that nature-based tourism was the way to go. We certainly had, the Papi yachts that came up, and certainly Janice Amor with Anchorage, and we had Evergreen and some of these smaller hotels, but they were really small boutique hotels, and they were not seen as being able to meet the demands of the growing population and economy of Dominica. Also, you need population to make an economy grow, and we have a very high percentage of nationals living abroad. I don't have the hard statistics, and it's unfortunate that this is not readily available, but anecdotally what we understand is maybe we have 150,000 born Dominicans living abroad, and we count maybe about a little over 70,000, if that much, living in Dominica. If 2/3 of your productive population left you and are not here, I don't know if it's the 1/3 that's here that can really make that much of a difference. And this is sort of where we are and trying to forge our way forward. Certainly on the tourism side, the Dominica recognizes that it now has an advantage in the area of ecotourism. And so there's been a thrust towards ecotourism with properties certainly like Jungle Bay, which is the one that I lead, which is now a larger scale model. It follows the principles of ecotourism, but it's a larger scale model that employs more people, sort of along the lines of a conventional resort. We employ
For sure, we
100
will get there.
Mm-hmm.
So I want us to crawl still.
I would say, yeah, my mic. Just to get a little focus, the main exodus since the last war has been to the United Kingdom, and particularly during the 3 years, 1959 to 1962, Dominicans left in large numbers to seek employment, and census figures show that during the period, out of a population of 59,479, some 7,915 immigrated, or 15.3% of the population. And the migration has continued along the way. And as Sam was saying, the migration continued to the Virgin Islands and to Guadeloupe. Guadeloupe and the Virgin Islands. Most of our population migrate. And if you read as we go forward, you will see that the headlines in this week's Chronicle, we need more people. That's what the headline is saying. We need more people, and government begins first phase of measures to support Dominica's population growth, because the population has declined significantly. So I just thought I would just throw that in.
As we are saying this, just want to say good evening to the viewers and listeners. Good evening to you, Brenda Alexander, Roslyn Severin McLean. Good evening to you, Yakima Perryman, Sonia Williams, good evening, and all those Angelo, Allen, good evening, to be on board with us. It's really important to note that we have all types of people literally listening to this kind of program and viewing that kind of program. Now, Sam or Kenny, can you help us during that period of bananas and limes, what our economy was like? How can you break it down for us?
Cecil, I'll let Kenny answer that, but back to a point that Hartly made in terms of needing population. Yeah? You had a population in 1950, just as an example, in the United States Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John, they had 30,000 people. By 1990, they had about 120,000 people. So they virtually quadrupled their population as the economy exploded. So to the point of, and I just want to, I'm glad you brought this up early, and this is something that we will have to re-emphasize. If we want to talk about the development of the economy of Dominica, we have to talk about the expanding the population of this country, because we simply do not have enough numbers of productive people to drive the economy of Dominica. So Kenny, I'll allow you to speak to the point.
Thank you, Sam. I think this is going to be a consistent theme, discussing the demographic issue that we have in Dominica, because for me it actually represents the most clear and present danger to our development. You could see the clear and present challenge. With regards to your earlier question about the economy of Dominica during those formative years, they were colonial economies. And that's the simplest way to put it. Because you had a colonial power and most of the exports went to them. And that was relatively stable because you had one power essentially consuming most of the product that left the island. It's from that stemmed most of the business initiatives, and this is why Elrose became so dominant, because they figured out that they could grow limes and process it into drinks that could be sold on the world market, and also to actually utilize limes for a number of different other uses. When you came to bananas again, it was a British company, and even when Geest when Geest fell apart, so to speak. When I say fell apart, when they decided to exit, they sold to another British company, Fifes. So they were colonial economies, and that's what made the United Kingdom strong at the time that it was. They imported tea from India, they got different raw materials, they got precious metals from Africa, and they got sugar and banana from the Caribbean. And some of these relationships came all the way forward into the modern era. I remember doing some work in Guyana, and Gaisuco, who are the major sugar producer in Guyana, still have a very, you could call it incestuous relationship with Tate and Lyle, who does most of the sugar. So we had a colonial economy. And when you have a colonial economy, it creates what you call shore markets, because you get that false sense of security because your product always sells, because you have one buyer who's always going to take your product. And that has been a consistent theme.
Would you say, sorry, Kenny, would you say that that kind of economy allow our people in the region, to include that of Dominica, to find themselves into Great Britain?
You mean to
work?
migrate?
Yes.
I mean, back then, people saw the UK as a mother country. So it created, again, that false sense of security. Just like you can sell your products to the United Kingdom, many people thought then that they were British. You know, that's where our love for cricket came from. I mean, these are what we call accidents of birth. Had we been an American colony, we would have been fond of baseball. But we are a British colony, so we are fond of cricket. That is both the sense of security that colonization seemed to give, but it's also how you lose yourself, because culturally you adopt the mannerisms of someone else because they are your dominant, they are the dominant power. But what Sam said earlier, I think we're going to come into that, because this is probably the thing that I am most insistent upon on communicating this evening, which is that you can put all of the steps in place, you can put all of the measures in place for an economy. If you do not deal with the demographic issue, which, by the way, all of the Caribbean islands are dealing with in a different extent, but we're Dominicans, we're concentrating on Dominica.
It is also good, though, Kenny, that when we speak, we can make some not necessary comparison, but we can talk of the issue of challenges that each of us in the Caribbean would have encountered in the same process. Because I'm sure moving from bananas in St. Lucia, in St. Vincent, in Grenada, they would have maybe encountered the same kind of situation that we encountered. Because some time ago I was in St. Lucia, and I'm hearing one side is saying, but you took away bananas from us. And I'm thinking that our politicians maybe are not able to articulate the issue where concerns of that shift of the economy.
I don't think any politician can deal with the fact that we are still tied into a global economy in which we are dependent, and which we can be switched off like that. And that's what happened with bananas. And it wasn't just, by the way, with the banana story, it wasn't just the United States. The other main player was Germany, because Germany were the largest consumer of bananas in the EU. And at that time, the United Kingdom were just joining the EU regime. And Germany linked up with the US before the WTO to say, well, you know, they were paying artificially high prices for these bananas from the Caribbean. And that, you know, by dropping the subsidies, it would allow for the price of bananas to drop, which it supposedly did. But that basically killed us. And it killed the banana industry. But the other part to this is that the market once, and Sam spoke about the fact that, you know, there were 6,000 plus banana farmers. That number dwindled very quickly once the industry came under the stress of loss of subsidies. And that showed to everyone that essentially the industry was never sustainable. And that's the recurring theme for so many of these economies in the Caribbean, which is that we are very, very sensitive. You hear this term being said that we're sensitive to external shocks. That's proof positive.
Sam, in terms of the tourist industry, what difference would you have seen in the move away of agriculture, which was in the Leeward Islands, that's sugarcane? What difference did you see, or what preparation did you see that these countries would have done compared to that of us in the other side of the region, which is the Windward Island? That's what we call ourselves.
Well, other than Trinidad, that depended on manufacturing, and Haiti to the north, all the Caribbean became dependent, and Dominica, all the Caribbean became dependent on tourism, because that became the mainstay by the 60s, by the 70s, by the 80s and 90s. Everyone fell into this. And they shifted from sugarcane or whatever other industry they had, because for them, I mean, developers came through the Caribbean basically and said they were looking for a safe haven. This is the place to go. People are becoming more affluent. They want to basically thaw out in the winter. That's what the tourism product was about. They want to go and get in the sun and get sun rays somewhere. And your island, you have beautiful beaches. Allow us to develop a beach, a beautiful big hotel on your beach, and we will provide low-end jobs for your people. And you know what? They won't have to do the back-breaking sugarcane cutting work. That's literally what they offered. And if you do not allow us to go here, we'll just go someplace else. And that was the arrangement that they made. And at the time, the political directorate on the other islands felt, well, let's try to get as many of these jobs for our people as possible, because they felt that was the best option. And the issue of the cruise ships started to come through, and basically offered the same thing, or except they say we want low head tax, and you should build a port, and you should build this, and you should provide security, and we'll bring in these cruise ship visitors, and you can open stores, and so on and so forth. And then you got the building of a tourism economy. I just want to be clear to the audience. Some people view tourism and manufacturing and agriculture, we have our differences, but there's a common similarity in that everyone's trying to get foreign exchange. That's what this whole thing is about. And the other industries, it's the sale of things, export of things to these big economies. Well, tourism is no different. Tourism is effectively an export commodity that's consumed domestically. If you can stop and think about it, because it's like we're selling hotel rooms to foreigners, but we can't take the hotel rooms out to where they live, so they have to come here and consume it and leave the money with us. So you still have effectively the same trade that you had with bananas or some other industry. So we want to think about tourism as this foreign export commodity essentially, and bring the monies into the domestic economy. And with that, we saw the growth of tourism in the other islands. They had some advantages, because as I said before, they had white sand beaches, which is what the brand called for. CTO, Caribbean Hotel Association, they all promote a Caribbean brand that's sun, sand, and sea. We don't have that. So the thinking was, it's very simple. Get on board. Let's do our common marketing. We're going to need to get airlift, so let's get an airport built, in your island, so you can get direct jet airlift, because no one wants to stop any place else. I mean, the islands, if all these islands was one city somewhere, they would only have one airport. They would have one international airport serving all these islands. So all these islands being in different places, and you need a separate international airport for all these islands. So then none of these islands is effectively, their airports are, not if economically viable as an airport, as a business. But it's necessary as a loss leader in economic terms to attract the direct foreign revenue, because other than if you don't have that airport, you're not going to get the visitors coming in. So they had the airport, they fought for direct airlift, and they started even subsidizing that and doing whatever incentives they put in place to attract the hotels, and that drove the economy. And you need basic security. Some of them basically, built these enclaves, Jamaica and some of these other places, where visitors stayed in a contained area when there are issues of security and so on and so forth. And there's always a conflict between the developers and the local politicians and the economy, but they kept things going, and that sort of created these economies on these other islands, and it led to people earning a livelihood from tourism. But Dominica, because the reasons I said before, we didn't have the sun, sand, and sea, and as a result of that, and we didn't have the airport. So we were out of the game for what people thought of when they thought of tourism in the Caribbean. You don't think you're coming to get rained on in Dominica. You think you're coming to get some nice, hot, sunshine to get away from the snow wherever you are. And sort of this is how those economies developed, the tourism sector developed in the Caribbean. And now Dominica is at an interesting point where how do we get into this? Because as we see, we lost the trade in agriculture effectively. How do we get into this tourism thing? What comparative advantage do we have? Can we be part of this Caribbean model, or do we have to try to find another model? And where is the world going? And now we're finding out, hey, we may have something that's equally or that's very interesting to visitors, because everyone now is into health and wellness. Everyone wants to see nature. And this is what we have. So how can we use what we have, our whales, that we have residents and migrants here? How can we use, all the waterfalls and the hot springs for spas? And maybe we're sitting on a gold mine, and all we need to do is to refine the product in a way that it can be utilized. And
so Sam, I'm sure we're going to come to this part of it, because that's an interesting point that we need to make. Just want to say good evening to Asquith Pinard. Say good evening, guys. Yannick Coldwater Perryman. David Hector says that he's locked in from Cole, New Jersey. I'm sending love to all my people from Soufriere. Wally Sentile, good evening to you. Maria Joseph is watching. Patricia Richard says good evening. Snapper Laura says two brilliant minds, Kenny and Sam. Thank you very much, Snapper. Sandra says she's watching. Cecil Clark says good, Kenny, good show, my friend. Marvelyn Breedy, good evening everybody, and have a blessed night. And continue, quite a number of people are actually looking on. Florence Seja, educational program, love this. And Dennis Augustine says great conversation. And Patricia Richard says, what about construction, which we are going to talk about in a while. Ruben Michel said that he's watching. And so, Kenny, we heard quite a lot about the demise of the banana industry in the mid-90s. We heard a lot of the times people are talking about shifting of the goalposts about the industry. What do you make about that shifting of the goalposts? What was that about?
You mean the banana industry?
The banana industry.
Well, as we said earlier, I mean, we did not have the lobbying capabilities. If you go and you read, I think there's a guy called Randall Robinson who spoke extensively about it. The Caribbean never...
Trans-Africa.
Yes, yeah. We never really had knowledge of the intricacies of lobbying. And as I said, Carl Lintner was an influential millionaire. He had a relationship with both the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, and also Bob Dole was the majority leader of the Republicans. And they lobbied effectively, and they lobbied the Germans, and they, as I said, ironically, at the time we had 2.5% of the global market, and somehow they managed to convince the WTO that our 2.5% was a threat to the 65% that Chiquita Dole had. But we were colonial economies set up for the benefit of the British, and the British star was on the wane. So with Britain's fortunes and one of its major companies, Geese, so did ours. And so that's what happens when you hitch your boat to a ship that is basically going in the wrong direction.
But Kenny, in the preparation of the mid 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, how much preparation as a people, because our government would have seen the demise and the shifting of the goalposts, and they would have known that Germany, the United States, Portugal, these countries took us to the World Trade Organization, to the courts. They knew that things are going to change. What kind of preparation did we make? What kind of preparation did we tell our people? Did we continue talking about bananas, and we knew that bananas was going to move?
Well, it's easier said than done to be able to diversify. I remember back then, I was a student. I mean, that the talk was from Mary Eugenia Charts at the time in the Freedom Party about diversifying away from bananas. But you have to remember that we had rural economies essentially being wholly supported by the banana industry, and farmers themselves only knew that trade and being able to sell their product to geese. That's all they knew. That's what sent their children to school. That's what got them all their vehicles. That's what purchased all of their commodities. So whilst you could talk about it, it's almost like a hurricane is coming, but you're not seeing any bad weather. The sun is still shining. And until you've really had your first bad hurricane, you really don't know what's going to happen, and you don't think it's going to be as bad as it looks because the hurricane isn't here yet. So most people did not think about it that way. At the same time, I think if we go back a little, one thing we want to mention, we spoke about the fact that you had the sugar producing islands and the banana producing islands, but there were some hybrid islands, and unfortunately the British picked and chose which countries they wanted to develop certain industries in. So you had Cayman, for example, and BVI and Bermuda basically being looked at for the financial services industry. And if you look back on the history of those countries, they go back a long way. I mean, Cayman's financial services industry is very old. I mean, in 2014, 2015, they said they had 92,000 companies in Cayman. But some of them go back as far back as into the 18th century. So, we are a victim of our colonial relationship and the comfort that came with that.
If I may, on that, Cecil, it's politicians are slow to move often, and people want to hang on to nostalgia, and that's what the people were used to. But I don't know, when did you come back to Dominica, Kenny?
2000, when I came back from studying and living overseas, 2002.
2002. So I came back a little earlier, and I came back in 1995, 96. And at that time, you could remember there was a big push to international business companies, a big push to internet gaming, a big push to a lot of offshore financial
and that's where I was going to.
things and so on. So the government then did seek to find alternatives, but even in that space, as Kenny suggested, the very people that, we were competing against people that had a stranglehold on those industries, and they made it difficult to impossible for us to get a headway in them because they had jurisdictions that were competitive in those areas, So there you have it. And we did make a valiant effort in those areas, but I don't think we realized the success that we...
Let's remember, St. Kitts has the oldest citizenship by investment program in the world. That was in 1984. And then the Canadians came in between with the Quebec investment program. Dominica is next in 93. 93. And Sam is right. I mean, I remember there were gaming companies here. There were gaming companies all over. Some in Mont Daniel, up in Roger, a few all over the place. But in 1999, the U.S. sanctioned, went before the WTO against Antigua. Antigua was the kind of the leader of the internet gaming fraternity. And the Antigua took the U.S. to the WTO because what was happening was that Americans were playing, were gambling online, and the companies were domiciled in Antigua. And what was happening was that the winnings of the players were being domiciled in Antigua as tax-free from the American players. And the Americans did not like that. The American government did not like that. They took Antigua Antigua took them before the WTO because the Americans essentially shut down that industry. And the WTO awarded Antigua a win. The Americans appealed. They lost. And to this day, the Americans have not paid the $100 million. That's from since 1999. The Americans just ignored the WTO. And that's not one government or the other. It's bipartisan. So the problem is when you're dealing with being regulated by powers, and the speech by the Canadian Prime Minister put it in context, which is that the powerful will do what they must and the weak shall do what they can, which is just me paraphrasing it. But that's the reality. So in that time in the 90s, we did have offshore gaming. We also had a lot of the IBCs, as you said. And then on the switchover in the government from UWP to Labour, there was a dropping of a lot of the offshore industry because the FATF, right around the 2000s, blacklisted Dominica. I remember back then. Because of the offshore industry.
I think also too. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to make a point. Yeah. You have to follow it historically. And what we are saying now, and we have to keep focusing on what we see happening in Europe. Can you just mention Canada finding its way into China? We just saw Stammer finding his way into China, because they realize that the tariffs, big power playing, they decide that those tariffs will hurt their jobs. So people are moving away from a dependence on the United States, because the United States have a habit of using tariffs and sanctions on you to destroy your economy. Simple as that. So we in small island states, we are very vulnerable to things that's happening outside our jurisdiction. And so we ourselves have to find a way to adapt to change in terms of survival economically. Because the United States and our next door neighbor. So we have to find ways. You're now finding that oil is going to play another big role in terms of how the Americans stranglehold some of the small islands. You see what's happening in Venezuela. So let us keep focused as we see the changing of the economies.
As we see the changing of the economies, Sam and Kenny, what happened to the rest of the region when we started to diverse our economies from agriculture now to the service sector, and the service sector has repeated itself again, but into economies or programs like what Kenny just made mention of. The offshore business, the offshore gaming. How did we in the region support each other on that, especially Barbados?
Barbados, I'm not too sure how you are slanting that question, but Barbados has a slightly different relationship with the rest of the region.
But Barbados did try to conform with respect to the tax regime.
Well, that is very, very recent.
Yeah,
okay, if we fast forward, if you want to fast forward, the IBCs, so international business companies, were a big thing in the region. And it's only very recently, over the last 5 years, that the Dominica and the rest of the countries in the Eastern Caribbean and Barbados had to basically shut down much of the advantages, the tax advantages of IBCs, because the OECD basically said, we're going to blacklist you if you don't do it. And let me just explain this. an international business company is where a foreign entity can register a business in a Caribbean island like Dominica, like Barbados, at a tax rate which is at 0% typically. So that company being registered here, all its revenues would effectively be denoted at 0% as against the indigenous tax rate for a local company. So Dominica was one of the bigger jurisdictions for that, and that was actually a brainchild of back then of Julius Timothy. He was the one who started that process back then in the 1990s. But it filtered through because all of the other Caribbean islands had some form of IBCs. And in recent times, the OECD said, we're going to blacklist you if you don't make your IBC's tax rate harmonize with your indigenous tax rate. So if, for example, in Dominica, it's, let's say, 32% or 30%, they're saying either you make the IBC's 30% as well in terms of their tax rate, or we will blacklist you.
Or you can make your local rate.
Well, they never said that.
But that it's effectively.
So they never said that.
That's
but
the
what
implication.
That's what's the implication. So everybody went into Parliament. Dominica was probably the first to do so, to harmonize. Barbados decided to play the game a different way. So Barbados said, you know what? We're going to reduce our corporate tax rate for Barbadian businesses to 5% and increase our IBC tax rate to 5%, and we're harmonized. So we're good. The EU, the OECD said, great, well done, and then the EU promptly blacklisted Barbados. All right, I remember this well because I think our Prime Minister was the only Prime Minister who stood up for Barbados at the time because it was seen as a big thing. Because the EU felt like Barbados had tricked them. But what's important about that, what's really, really important about that, is that a sovereign country was being dictated to by being told that its tax rate, because the reason the EU said they were going to blacklist Barbados was that they said Barbados was practicing harmful taxation practices. The reason being, in Europe, Holland, both directly and through its colony, Curacao, was doing the very same thing as Barbados. So it was essentially edging them out of the game.
But Holland was at 10%.
Yes.
And the EU felt that
Barbados
5% was too low.
It's going to take their business away from them.
But a lot of the larger countries have outer island colonies that have, you can say, very advantageous tax structures. And if the Eastern Caribbean islands were allowed to compete in that game, then it would basically take national tax revenue from those countries, and it would put their outer islands and outer jurisdictions, it would be at a disadvantage to them. So there's not much listen, when you don't have the might, there's not much you can do, and we're seeing in today's world, we don't have the might that's
So Sam, looking at this, what then is the cost of development in all of this?
I don't understand your question. First of all, I think when we speak of the cost of development...
Because we are saying that we are doing our best to help in the development of our economies. Our people have to survive, and we have to become innovative. When we become innovative, the multinationals would squeeze us. We go to Parliament, we do all of this. So I'm asking you, what then is the cost of development in all of this?
Well, I would have to say we have to find, because we're so small and we're in the land of the giants, we maybe have to find ways in which we can do interesting creative things that they don't see as a threat to themselves. I think that, that to me is the practical thing. You can't fight the bigger guy, that's there that have might and can really shut you down.
But you're saying that, Sam. But when we look
But
at
we have
the
to find a way to do it.
when we look at the tourist industry, we looked at a clever way to do it for our survival.
Right.
But when we did that, a number of taxation were placed on us
In the tourism industry?
in the tourism industry.
What do you mean by that?
What do I mean? Where we find that when cruise ships are coming in, we know the cost. We had to build, as I said earlier on, we had to build our cruise ship berths, and so we had to do a big investment, maybe take loans to get these things done. So it was really a cost to our economy. So I'm asking you, don't you see this as really crippling the small economies?
I think, that's the best option we have, Cecil, at the time. And there's no sense crying over it because there's not much we can do about it. Maybe about 30% of the U.S. cruise industry's revenue comes from the Caribbean. And that puts us in an advantageous position. I think that what we need to see is how can we maximize on the return of investment of what it is that we're doing. How can we do that? Right now in Bermuda, they charge about $200 a head tax. Bermuda has set aside it's a unique jurisdiction, and the cruise ships overnight there. Cruise ships coming to the Caribbean, they tend to compete island against island, and the head tax that we get to cover the cost of water and security, etc., is much, much less because they play us one against the other. Those are some of the things that we need to see how it is that we can get more revenue, and also to not just in terms of a tax from them, but how can we have more economic activity, because people are coming to these islands, and literally, Cecil, half the people stay on the ship when they come to Dominica. So how can we get them off the ship and get them busy spending money, because they're traveling, they have money to spend, get them spending money. So in terms of the cruise, we need to then decide, what's the carrying capacity of the cruise industry? How many do we really want? When you ask about development, that's what I was trying to get. What are we talking about the development? We need to decide what it is that we want. What do we call development? Do we call edifices development? Do we call, how do we destroy the nature and build things? Is that development? So, we need to first define as language what it is, what's our target, what do we call development, what are we trying to achieve, what's our carrying capacity, what type of tourism do we want, and then we can see where we can put things in perspective, put things in place to go after those things. Because I firmly believe that there's a lot in tourism, especially in the type of tourism that Dominica has to offer, that can provide a very good livelihood for Dominicans, that can attract many Dominicans back to Dominica. I see it on a fairly frequent basis, and that can attract other investors to come into Dominica to really drive our economy. And I think even more so than the other islands, because their sun and fun and sea is getting kind of stale, and the world is right now looking for wellness and adventure. So if we focus on this, I think, and really, put our best foot forward, I do believe that that ecotourism, wellness tourism, sustainable tourism, I think that Dominica can thrive if we play our cards right.
Give me a question. I just need to follow up on that question. In terms of what type of tourism we need, do we really need the big hotels? And we have to be blunt. We have to think intellectually. You talk about the type of tourism in terms of sustainable development where nature is what we have. Is it a type of ecotourism you're thinking of, Sam, like yours? Or are we thinking about the big hotels?
Well,
What are we really? Because I think we have a struggle between what we really want. Do we really want the big hotels, or do we want the Sam Raphaels or the Nassif type of industry? Well, what is it?
Well, the hotel I operate employ 140 people. I don't know. That may be a very small hotel to you, but it's I think a fairly good size. So you say big hotels or like Jungle Bay, I think you're saying. I think we can do hotels that can have good numbers, that can purchase a lot from the supply chain in Dominica, but it's how you do it. And I think, that's the key. And so I think that's a good point. But I don't wish to toot my horn on this thing.
No,
I will allow Kenny to speak on this because I don't want this to be focused on Jungle Bay and that sort of thing. Kenny, you
Sam
can
is correct,
speak
but
to this.
I think there's something that I think you agree with, which is that so often people, you hear, especially locals, talking about why are they building so many hotels on the CBI, for example. We have a fraction of the rooms needed. I think we have export already probably about 500 rooms in Dominica.
I would say maybe a little more, but certainly not 1,000.
And think
Hotel rooms.
Hotel rooms.
But I think there's a little secret that's happening in Dominica, which is the bed and breakfast.
The Airbnb
and I think
type
that
properties.
is probably where we will see an explosion in the short term to meet the growing demands. Because I'm here to say we have a lot of demand for rooms. It's just, as Hartly said, what type of rooms is there demand for in Dominica?
But at the same time, to answer his question, right now the Airbnb is playing a very important role because of the nature of our access, our traffic.
And the nature of our product.
Yes, but when you have an international airport and you have flights, 1,000 people coming in over a small concerted period, many of them will come in on package tours. Correct. They will not go in to Airbnb.
Correct.
Airbnb is for the single family, the guy from Guadeloupe, the guy
want
from
to
Trinidad.
hunt through the internet and find.
Exactly, they hunt through. A package tour, group, etc. They'll come and they'll buy. 200 of them will come through Newmont Travel in the UK or through some other relationship in the US or through Germany, etc. So the answer is that it's going to have to be a mixed bag of hotel stock. It's going to be eco resorts, it's going to have to be Airbnbs, and it's going to have to be the intercontinentals of this world.
But even so, Kenny, I think, and Hartley, going back to your point, there's the hotel structure is one thing, but the experience is another thing. And we may say the hotel structure is just a part of it, but the experience that the hotels are going to have to offer will have to be consistent with what there is demand for.
Yeah.
And I think that when I think maybe, I don't want to be seen as criticizing anyone here, but I think we need to understand the industry in which we're in. We need to understand our market and to understand why they're coming to Dominica. They're coming for an experience, and we need to be able to offer that experience in a compelling and a competitive way. And I think if we do that, I think the future would be bright.
It's not my intention to really take calls because I really want us to have that educational conversation. But someone is on the line. Let's see who's on the line. Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening. Let me say very good, and informative conversation. But I was just burning inside as you were repeating the trade laws and the various decisions taken by the powers that be that tend to stifle the economic growth of small island states, like ourselves. And I think I want to give Sam the sort of support there in what is it that is actually saying. What is it that we really do? And what is it that we can really do? For example, when Adams was talking in reference to the WTO, and he mentioned it was a bipartisan decision. And remember, I think we had President Clinton at that time, who was supposed to be a Democratic president. Now, even during that time, following Reagan, persons like Reagan, you had even the CBI, the Caribbean Basin Initiative. I don't know if you can remember that, Sam, or Cecil.
Correct.
Yes, I was going to come to that too myself. And
okay,
NAFTA.
Beautiful.
Yes.
All right. And that was meant to assist us. Questions can be asked as to what is it that we did? How did we take advantage of the CBI? Now, as it relates to the WTO, you had the companies like Dole and Chiquita that was actually growing banana at a much cheaper cost of production than we were able to produce banana in the Windward Islands per se. Now, when it comes to trade, how could England, could the UK, United Kingdom, defend us? Because remember, the UK was subsidizing our banana price. In fact, at that time, it was how much, 10 cents a pound? or even less than that. How could we do that, and what effort did the UK, the United Kingdom, actually make in order to ensure that we could have the technology to produce banana at a cost that could be productive? So irrespective of legislations that have been set, the point I want to push across, our problem has always been the cost of produce, the cost of production. You know, how much would it cost us to actually produce a pound of banana that we can sell it at a price that, regardless of what part of the world that they go to establish farms and huge farms, that our cost of production would give us a way on the market. I wish whilst you're there, you could go back even to the timber industry as well. Cecil, remember what we used to call it, dumb can?
Dumb can, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, what really happened to that? Some fellows like you are great guys, continue to invest, continue to see, you know, what you can establish in terms of ensuring that you can lay down an economic program, activity that can actually assist us in the future, even after persons like you and I leave.
Thank you.
But I'll continue to listen. I just want to commend you on your level. That is a big Lakou. That Lakou tonight is a big one.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
In the Lakou, remember always that there was discussions, you know, and that's the rationale for the program, the discussion in the yard, where not just Black Power talk that they used to have. In the Lakou, they spoke about the West world. In the Lakou, they spoke about what the West was doing and what Europe was actually doing.
In the Lakou, we always want to know what's affecting us, you know,
Right,
economic.
right. So
what happens to us? How do we survive?
So yes, Kenny, the caller, I think, addressed a few concerns to you.
The cost of production. I don't want to be negative, but we have to be realistic. We were subsidized as colonies because we represented a profit advantage to Geest and to Elrose and Company. That's the be all and end all. If you look at the economies of scale, we don't have it, and we never will.
Did we have it before?
No, we never had it before.
We never had it.
We never had it, and we never will. And I think these are the kind of, we're not politicians, so we can say these things, you know, because, look, every stage of our development is dependent on global markets. The situation with the United Kingdom, Britain, England, was that they were a great power, which then ceded to the United States. And therefore, what happened in the banana industry was a metaphor for the baton change from the leadership of the global economy from
Great point, Kenny.
England to the United States.
Great point, Kenny.
Because Chiquita was an American-owned company.
Yes.
And the banana industry in the Caribbean was geese. So the reality is that we are hustlers. That's what the Caribbean islands are. We are hustlers.
So let me ask you, the ACP countries, we talk about the Caribbean. What about the Pacific? Was it geese or was it...
Well, okay, if you rewind a little bit, when the subsidies were removed, it affected Martinique and Guadeloupe too, because they got preferential treatment through France. It affected Madeira too, as a colony of Portugal, the Canary Islands as a colony of Spain. They all went through the same thing. But as I said, our focus here is Dominica.
But I know our focus is Dominica, but it's also very important to let people have a greater understanding that this scenario was not only just in the face of Dominica. So it must be told that, hey, we all went through that process.
What happened with the Pacific and Africa? Well, the Pacific, many of the places like Cook Islands, etc., went into financial services. They became offshore jurisdictions, offshore tax jurisdictions, and Marshall Islands, Cook Islands, etc. In Africa, the story is a bit different because, especially in the French West Africa, which I'm most acquainted with, as we say, the industry was clearly agricultural, and now Africa is building tourism. It's kind of like a new ground for them. But for us here in the Caribbean, the thing is, we're getting a car and we're learning to drive at the same time. Because the agricultural industry was an industry that was handed over to us from a colonial base. The tourism industry, we're having to, especially Dominica, because as Sam was mentioning earlier, I don't know if you mentioned it, Sam, the tourism industry in the other islands started earlier than in Dominica. And it came from a base, even from investors from the colonial powers, from the US and the UK.
Good point, Kenny. If we have to look at Antigua and Barbados, when sugarcane was affected, they already had the international airport, or they had a jet airport. That's what I think they called it at the time. Versus Dominica, who just had an airport that was taking, a few people. So that's a great point that you're making, and I would like you and Sam to expound on that.
So before I expound on that, Cecil, in terms of the bananas, going back to Dominica and the rest of it, Dominica, remember, had a disproportionate dependence on bananas versus the other ECP countries. Huh? So if you look at the percentage of foreign exchange, it's more than 50%. I forget how much.
So it's close to 70%.
Of our dependence on that. That wasn't the other islands. They
As a matter of fact, Dominica was 86% relying on the industry. When we made that $120 million in 1988, it was responsible for 86% of our industry, but it was only responsible for 0.02% of the world market.
Right. So we had a disproportionate dependence. So we were disproportionately affected by that ruling. Yeah. In terms of the question you asked in terms of tourism, what was that again?
No, I was saying that in reference to the whole issue of tourism, that we would have seen some kind of disadvantage.
Right.
To us.
So the other islands had, for instance, Antigua had a U.S. military facility that had an airport in Antigua. Barbados. So those other islands, they had their airports and they could jumpstart. They had the white sand beaches. They had what it took, what the investors were looking for. So it became an easier transition to redirect funds to those islands. And there wasn't much interest in Dominica because you couldn't get people here in the first place. How can you offer a service on an island where you can't get people to? And this has been at the core of Dominica's problem. In addition to that, why would you go to Dominica when it rains so much? When you don't have the white sand beaches, like you say, we say metaphorically we have 365 rivers in Dominica. And Antigua, they say they have 365 beaches. You have all those beaches in Antigua and St. Martin and all of those other islands. So they had a tremendous advantage in the tourism brand that the Caribbean had to offer. So Dominica was in the game, and it's only now, most recently, that we are finding ourselves, because there's a different type of tourism, and it's now, it's getting a proven track record with some of what we're seeing and we're doing in Dominica, that now there's a strong interest in it. I tell you, when I was trying to finance the original Jungle Bay, no one was interested because there wasn't any proof of concept in Dominica or in the Caribbean for that type of ecotourism and on that scale. Huh? And it's only now if you went to an institution and you said, because we have the financials and we have the track record, now someone will take you seriously. So going forward, we can't go backward and change the things that happen. Sure, we will learn from them, but we have to look going forward. Where can we go? And again, I asked the question in terms of development. We really need to determine what it is that we call development, and where is it that we want to go, so that we end up going where we choose to go, as opposed to just being out paddling our canoe in the ocean and not being clear in terms of where we want to land.
Let's go to the telephone. Someone's on the line. Good evening to you, caller. Good evening, caller. Good evening to you, caller. I'm sorry that lost you.
So at
Yes.
some point, I'll go on my soapbox about what I see as the clear and present danger for Dominica, because it's going to extend to everything that we do.
No, as we're talking about this process of Dominica's development, let us go back a bit in the mid 80s, into the 90s again, where we saw the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed between the United States, Mexico, and I think it was Brazil, no, Canada, sorry. So it was, the United States, yes, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. How did that affect business in the Caribbean, to a certain extent, Dominica?
Okay, so you mentioned earlier about the CBI, all right? That is
Yes.
the Caribbean Basin Initiative.
Initiative.
I think we also have to remember the role that DCP played at the time as one of the only manufacturers making use of the coconut industry in Dominica. But the Caribbean has, I think at last check, that was about 4 years ago, I checked that stat, about a $600 billion trade deficit with the United States.
Kenny, I will. That's the official statistic, but remember the point that I
Yes, about
made
tourism.
about tourism.
Yes.
Tourism is not factored into this, and if it is factored into this, it's probably non-existent, close to that. So go ahead with that.
Okay. I
I like that. I like that.
That's
Sam.
a good point.
I like that point.
But I belabor this to state
Yes.
that, and Sir Arthur Lewis was a big proponent of this, and the Chinese model of development is based on this, which is that you develop your industry, you develop your countries through leveraging commodities or means of production. And so tourism is captive.
Try to get into the mic.
Tourism is captive, and so when you look at the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which now is turned into the FTAA, CaribCan, which is the agreement we have with Canada, and the UK, we have one with the UK. It's an FTAA as well, I think. It's something like the FTAA. All of them depend on the Caribbean being able to export something to these countries to be able to create what we call in economics a balance of trade. Well, there is really none except for what Sam has mentioned, which is that tourism, in terms of people coming into our economies and spending money in our local economies, as being possibly the strongest trade value that we have from the islands. But we don't export real products en masse into those markets, and we don't have a history of even patenting or intellectual export in that regard. So that's why the other area that has come into focus has been financial services, because that is also a hidden export type of market. And the Caribbean does have a lot of potential for the financial services, which is where the citizenship by investment came in, and also where the offshore banking and also the offshore sector realized.
What this guy, before we go, let us take a caller quickly. Good evening to
There
you.
you go. Anything.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening, Cecil, and good evening to your guests, Mr. Sam and Mr. Kenny. I'm calling just to be part of the conversation as a former employee of both companies, the Gissy Line and Carnival Cruise Line. When I used to work with Giss, the time when bananas was dying in Dominica, not really bad dying in Dominica, when we took a trip to Costa Rica, what I saw, it amazes me because back then they had multiple companies taking bananas from Costa Rica to take to the United Kingdom and also to the United States. And when I see the great production that they had in Costa Rica, I see that the other islands, was left behind, And with Carnival Cruise Lines, I spent 5 years working with them. And what I saw when the guests are in the Caribbean islands and they stay on board, they were being entertained by the gaming industry that the cruise lines had, and also they had the water park on board the ship with the swimming pools and the slide and all that. And some of the people decide they stay in because they find more entertainment in doing that. So what I think that our islands can do in the Caribbean, not only Dominica alone, we need to compete against the cruise lines in those parts of what they offer their guests that stay on board. Such as some countries might have casinos like Aruba and Bahamas, and some might have water park like Trinidad. So we probably could focus some of that so that when the guest comes, they will want to try to get their foot wet in our water slide. Because not everybody want to go look at our mountains and our waterfalls. They probably just want to have fun, Anyway, if you have any questions you would like to ask as a former employee.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, all right. No, sir. Sam and Kenny, in reference to us in the region, more so Dominica. You were talking about the whole framework of NAFTA into the business of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. How did we play a part? How did the Caribbean play the part in that aspect? Did we play any by any chance?
No, because NAFTA was a free trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. I mean, it really was to flow between the three countries, and it has become a bone of contention with the Americans under Donald Trump. But the real issue has been whether we took advantage of the CBI, and that is the Caribbean Basin Initiative. You could say that Jamaica to a point did, and also Trinidad to a lesser extent, but we don't really have any large scale exports into any of those markets. However, what Sam said earlier about tourism bears mentioning again, which is that if you were to quantify the numbers based on the spend of tourists over any particular period, it would create a better balance of trade picture.
Correct.
Sam?
Kenny's correct. NAFTA wasn't really designed for the Caribbean. And if you want to talk about free trade, you need to look at, if you are a 100-pound boxer and somebody is a 250-pound boxer, and they say, okay, it's an even fight, you fight that person. You can say theoretically to a certain extent it's an even fight, but you have an unfair advantage. And certainly because we don't have economies of scale, I don't think there's much we can do to compete in a free trade arrangement with big states. We just can't. We just don't. I mean, a guy goes up, get a bunch of banana from the mountain, come back, go up, wash it, and say, you can't compete with. And there's not much we can do to compete with the bigger economies. And so as a result, I think the only thing we can compete with is what we have strength in. And we need to focus on to identify what we have comparative advantages in.
But Sam and
to me, clearly one of those things is what the island has to offer.
But
which is something that people want, and I see it every day, Cecil. And hopefully we get to the point in the program where we talk about some of the opportunities. I will,
because we're talking about
in tourism, but specific, because I see them in Suffer every day, from free diving to, man, this island is a gold mine of opportunity, but we're not looking at those things. and we're trying to compete in areas where we don't have a competitive advantage. And I wish us well if we continue to do that, but I don't think we'll be
outside
successful.
of the fact of the services. We have seen in our parts where people with largesse come to our shores and invest. And one example we can give clearly is this guy in Antigua, Stanford. That's one example. But we have seen...
What's the example of Stanford? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying that he came to the Caribbean, he came to Antigua, and he was helping to boom the industry. So I'm looking at that aspect of it.
But the record is he was running a scam. I don't know if I would use Stanford as the best example.
I wouldn't use him as the best example.
No.
Of course, he was. We know
he was playing with other people's money.
So he had that kind of Ponzi scheme where he was defrauding people. But basically, in terms of your point, Sam, I would like to take you on that. Let's go into it. That you see it every day in terms of your experience in the Jungle Bay 1, which you had before, and Jungle Bay 2, which you have now, in terms of what you see every day. I know, for instance, in Dominica, we're talking about things like the aerial tramp. We're looking at other areas in terms of what we can do, because obviously we have to be thinking of how we're going forward. Yes, historically we have the background, but what I want us to do is to see how is it that with our CBI that we have now, in terms of the airports that we build, the airport we are building, in terms of the aerial tramp, in terms of the geothermal, in terms of the jungle bees, how do we put all these things together, Sam? What do you see?
I think the component that I'm not hearing you say, Hartly, is the entrepreneurship that's needed.
Yes, well, bring it in, sir.
And I think that that's something that we easily discount because we don't really understand. You build a plant, you build a canning factory, you can build everything, and then it can maybe never open, or it opens and closes because you don't have someone that's driving it that would have the requisite capacity to do it, that entrepreneur. And oftentimes we look at businesses and think that businesses that can work, but businesses don't operate on their own momentum. And we really need to attract investors that have the entrepreneurial capacity. We need to unleash the entrepreneurial capacity of the Dominican people by creating an enabling environment for them to do it, as well as those that are away. And certainly we need more than just Dominicans in this thing. We need to attract non-Dominicans, and I say it here, if we are to really grow the economy, because we simply don't have that. So I think the entrepreneurship, if you create the enabling environment in Dominica and allow entrepreneurs to do it, it's not, the government can't do it. The government, you don't do it. You don't build these things. The people that are going to create a business out of it, let them build it. You just create the enabling environment. First, we need to pick up the garbage and stop disposing trash if we are the nature island in the Caribbean. I mean, I can be very specific, and I didn't come here to criticize. I came to be, to maybe make some suggestions and recommendations. But in terms of safety, we need to ensure that the island is safe. Because if you're talking about a type of ecotourism where people go in the bush, we need to ensure that we have a safe island with less trash, both in terms of our collection system, that we need to do a better job in. I'm not going to criticize. I'll say we need to do a better job in that. We also need to stop littering, throwing things around, enforcing things. We have Carnival coming around the corner, okay? And any sanctioned event, we should be pushing properly disposing the garbage. But if you go behind any even official event, you have more people just eat and we toss. And we want to talk about the nature island, but we're not behaving like nature islanders. So to me, this is when you talk about development, this is where I think that we need to focus on the development of our people, our mindset, the development of the infrastructure that's needed, the development of the laws and streamlining the rules to make investment attractive in Dominica, and to unleash and to not have a bias against people that's not from Dominica to
Yeah.
come in and make investments, and that to me is how we can easily see the island grow. And you know what? Those Dominicans that went away to find work will probably coming back home because maybe they don't like the way they're treated abroad. And if you can listen, all Dominicans I know, if they can make money and they can be treated well, they would rather be in Dominica. And so that's my thing. That's one way to get our people back home. But you have to unleash the power of entrepreneurships, and non-Dominicans have to be welcome in this game so that we can all work together to develop this country.
That last point that you made to me is the most important one, because I'm going to differ from you slightly.
Please.
I think from every premise that you have to make about the development of Dominica, you have to cater for the fact that most Dominicans are not going to come back. And I hate to say it like that.
Well, they can come back or not. I'm not saying they have to, but if they choose to, you create the environment that there's space for them to come back.
I agree with you on that point.
So I will say that. But I don't think you're going to get everyone coming back, because even culturally, people have gone away and they have families, they have mortgages, they have whatever. Everybody's going to drop what they're doing.
So if you look at what happened at the first...
You want to hold that thought? Let's see if we can take a caller quickly.
Yeah.
Good evening to you, caller.
Hey, Cecil, my brother.
Yes, good
Dennis
evening.
Augustine here.
Okay, thank you for calling.
Yes. Oh, a pleasure. You know, I've been inspired by this conversation, but also a little bit frustrated in that I haven't heard a lick about the largest part of the global economy. I think there's about 744 billion US dollars in IT outsourcing, 1.2 billion by 2030 that we are poised to compete for. And I think I'd love to hear your guest talk about the importance of digital, about 7 out of those $10 that people in the cruise ship spend stays at the tour operator. And I think we need to do things like have accessible digital payments and make inroads in that respect. So looking for commentary on digital, because it is a huge part of the global economy, and you don't need to build a factory to be able to compete in that area.
That's the strength
Love
of
the conversation. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
That's the strength of both Sam and Kenny. Kenny?
Where were we? We were talking about...
We were
about
talking
people,
about
people,
the people
absolutely.
with the
Yes, the people.
necessary. With the
So my thing is, okay, that's my thing in terms of what my soapbox is. I think we have an opportunity, but there's a huge challenge. Our population is aging, and our birth rate is declining, and we need, I mean, a few years ago I touted a visa program to allow for people to come into the island, an investor visa. It's more than needed now, because look at last Friday. What was significant about last Friday? It's the end of the month. Our entire consumption cycle in Dominica is based around the monthly end of the end of the month when people get paid, in particular the public servants.
Mm-hmm.
During the middle of the month and any other period, you could walk into the bank and any other area and it's a ghost town. That's the difference that having a population that is either growing or consuming throughout the entire cycle of the year. But we need new people. If you go to an event in Dominica and you're able to recognize everybody, that's not a good thing. And we've not taken that step to be able to get people to come to this country to live. And part of it has to be that Dominicans have to get rid of this paranoia that someone is going to come and take this country away from them. A few years ago, I met the Grenadian economist Michael Julian in Jamaica, and we had a discussion about it. And he told me something which came to this, which is why I came up with that at that time, to be able to do a residence visa, which is that in his estimation, his calculations, it would take between 200 to 250 families settling in any Eastern Caribbean country to supplant the entire tourism, the stayover tourism industry revenue. And I thought that sounded off. So I spent some time and checked the numbers. And he was right. Why? Because if someone comes and they live in this country, they buy a house, they rent a house, their children go to school, they have to get a car, they have to probably get a helper, they then become part of our largest taxation, which is consumption tax, VAT. That's what the government, that's the bread and butter of government outside of the other revenue. It's VAT. If you look at most working class people in Dominica, below 25, the government has been good in allowing people below particular thresholds to not pay tax. But it means that a smaller and smaller group of people are paying the burden of tax, and that includes the same working class people when they go and shop. You widen up that base, and then you get more people participating in the Dominica story. Because participating in tourism is great as an ongoing economic exercise. But what happens when you have a Maria? What happens when you have those external shocks like a COVID? It's the people who live here and consume who are going to sustain the island. And if you have that base shrinking, what's going to happen in 20 years' time? The government is investing so much in infrastructure. Domlec, which you know, Sam, investing geothermal. You have schools in areas where the population of children is declining.
In the East, it is significant.
Correct.
But let me ask, very interesting, because we need more people, as I indicated, is the headlines of the Chronicle, the latest edition. And I heard the Prime Minister himself talking to that. But we have a culture, as you just mentioned, in terms of people, Pakite you Port Dominic Hod no. In other words, people don't want foreigners to come and buy land and take over in the island. The concept where persons, well, if some people even talked about gated communities, I've heard that being bandied about, in terms of getting more people to come. I heard now why certain visas have been lifted for the people from Santo Domingo, and maybe people from Haiti will come sooner or later, because farmers, as you know, are saying that they need laborers, because the farmers, as you mentioned, a lot of the people are aging and the population is declining. In education, when I was there, I noticed that the populations, even in Tibo, in, for instance, in areas like Butika, where we've had to close down a couple of schools because of the numbers are declining. Even in Scott's Head, we had to close down the school in Scott's Head because we had no population.
Correct.
So that's a very phenomenon. And how do you see us being able to generate that influx of persons? Because even you're hearing about the deportees, there's a lot of discussions on the road where people are saying to me, criminals are going to come. They don't want criminals, and they still don't want deportees. How do we get away from that to get people to come to the island? That's a big discussion. We need people, but how?
So if you have an RBI, which is a residence by investment, which is different from a CBI, you attract through specific packages people to come to the island, and they can naturalize and get citizenship by living here. Now, the question about the paranoia is real. There is a real paranoia, but it's not based on reality. The Canadian community in Calibishi is almost all gone. The long time ago we had a small Swedish community in Cochrane. That's gone. This idea that people are coming to take Dominica away from us is a myth. And it's a myth that is actually self-perpetuating, because what's happening is that it creates this idea that we should create barriers rather than opening up. And it takes government now to lead by policy to say, you know what? The reality is We need not just more people, but we need people who are willing to assimilate into our culture and at the same time be able to finance the next generation of Dominicans. And you can only do that by putting policy in place. There are other things that we can do. I'll give you a couple of examples. I would, if I was the government of Dominica, I would do simple things like increase the threshold of people who could qualify to being Dominicans. Right now, if both your grandparents are Dominicans, you're not eligible to be Dominicans. Barbados, I think, changed that. Most of the other islands are not the same. Barbados is unique, I think, in that regard. But Dominica can and should do the same, because it will widen the amount of people who would qualify for a Dominican passport because both their grandparents are Dominican. Also, women who have had children, Dominican women who have had children prior to 1978, for example, because Dominica was not independent back then, their children don't qualify under our constitution to be Dominican. We can change that. Those are very little things, small things. That's one set of things. But doing an RBI where people come and they naturalize, there's probably 4 countries in the world where you can stay in a country for 2 years or less and naturalize. We need to do that, because if you bring in a better set of immigrants in terms of them having more spending ability, what will happen is that another class of immigrants will follow to come to help service the industries that they'll need. And then it will fit for everyone. But it needs to be policy, because it's a real problem. The Prime Minister has alluded to it, but again, policy has to follow that.
Let's take another call quickly, Sam, before. Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening to members and members. Fireman touching base. Mr. Sam Raphael is a great man. I love you for life. I'm going to spend your money people like you want in my country. Now, back to the point. You see the problem I have in that country, well and truly. We have a whole heap of people complaining and you're not doing anything. You have a whole heap of them have their money, sit down on their money, our country cannot move. So well and truly now, we need a lot of people in the country, but not to come and get jobs. We need people to come and create jobs. Invest their money in the country so that can keep us up and running, because that's one of the major problems in our country. Agricultural members, they go overseas, they elder people, they die, they can't come back. Them young people is pants and bottoms, don't willing to work, nothing about this crack and cocaine and gun and malice, nothing positive. So we need a new brand of people that have a different mindset, willing to work, respect our culture, respect our philosophy, and work with us. But the set of people never cursing. They don't have no money, they don't do anything in the country. But they complain, who can take our country? Nobody can take our country. We need people to bring money. Once you have money, no illegal money, to invest, maintain, support, and just do the right thing. We work in the volume. We need a new brand of people in our country, and we need people in the country. Because right now, it's like Rivernica doesn't have nobody. Let's get it straight. We have too much people I see again complaining, and they have money so long and they're not doing anything, and waiting for government to do anything. Government can't do anything. You need plenty like Mr. Sam Raphael, about 20 more like you. I work with people like you who are great, but I love you, and continue what I want to put more hotel and put some little factories, put some little things you can. You know, if I have a little 2 cents, I can work it, but I don't have nothing but I try to work it. You know what I'm saying? So I love people like you, Mr. Sam Raphael. So bring more people like you. So up and running, fireman running, that is my 2 cents for now. We need people with more to come and get jobs, to invest their money, make us great. Up and running,
thank you.
Fireman running, bless up, hip tap.
Let's take another call quickly. Good, sorry about that, caller. Let's take another caller. Good evening to you, caller. Good evening to you, caller. I'm sorry about that. Sam and Kenny, someone said, let's take a caller quickly before we go into that, what the person said. Good evening to you, caller. Good evening, caller. Good evening to you, caller. Good evening, caller. I'm not so sure why I'm not hearing that caller. Let's try someone else. Good evening, caller. I'm not so sure why. Someone said, Sam and Kenny, digital outsourcing, software, cybersecurity, business productivity software, business process outsourcing, etc., will represent a 1.4 trillion US dollars addressable market by 2030. Why are we not talking about it, even while using it to discuss these other sectors?
Okay, that fits into what the gentleman spoke to earlier. And there are initiatives. I remember before the war in Gaza, Israel Aid was in Dominica, and they were specifically working with young people to try to develop a cadre of persons to work in the IT space, and there is a lot of scope. We do have high-speed internet in Dominica. We've got Starlink. We've got, and that's basically what you need. We have a lot of people that now have the ability to work from home. I'm segueing a little here. Have the ability to work from remote locations like Dominica. And going back to the point on the enabling environment to attract persons specifically and policies. Thailand, for instance, recently they initiated a new law, and their law used to be they're trying to attract. Everyone's trying to attract productive people in their economy and high net worth people, and Thailand is an interesting destination. And their law basically, if you had a good record and you own the property, they would give you, the permanent residency automatically. Well, they've amended the law and made it even more aggressive. And basically, they said if you rent property, you can live in Thailand for the term of the rental. So if you rent property for a year, you get a year's time. If you rent it for 5 years, you automatically get 5 years. And a lot of people are moving through this planet, raising their kids in different places to give them multicultural experiences, running very interesting, productive businesses in these countries. And as Kenny suggested, Dominica is an ideal and interesting place for many people because of the nature aspect of the island, and they would like to bring their young families to spend some time in Dominica, and we're seeing some of this. But what we need to do is to put the environment in place. One of the things we need to look at is our taxation. How do we make it an interesting place for a young family to come from a taxation perspective? If you make your money online, doing whatever it is that you do, and it could be a range of things, working for a company elsewhere, etc., and you now have a certain tax credit if you work in a foreign place. How can we make it advantageous to you? Because our tax rate generally at the high level may be a bit high to attract certain people of that income level, Kenny, and so on. So those are the things that I think, but it requires a deeper conversation than what we're having now, Cecil. I just throw this out as a surface beginning conversation to show that there are opportunities out there, and now let's go further and try to explore them to see how we can attract people on the high productive end and on the lower end. When you talk about people coming from certain jurisdictions to even do agricultural work, we need people on both ends to come to boost the population, to boost the productivity, and to boost the economy.
Let's go quickly. Let's see if we can get that caller. He's been waiting on for a while. Good evening, caller. You're live.
Hi, good night, Cecil.
Thank you for holding on.
Yeah, man. Mr. Kenny and Brain.
Good night.
I really want to give Sam all the support, because maybe it's only people like he that can really speak for somebody to listen. And the gentleman who talked about he woke up in the cruise ships and his boat. Exactly what them saying is the truth. And we can put in all the infrastructure, but those little things, like the water sports, and like what Sam's saying, the city, keep the city clean, friendly, security. We have a small force which we call the cadet and the scout. Even on a tourist day on a Sunday, the Minister of Security should find some constitution to put a law in place so that these people can even help the police in the city, because it will be very harassful sometimes. I sell in the city now, and I know what it takes. And Mr. Sam said thing that we must produce
We must find a way to manufacture. Look at just in the late 70s. Mr. Nassif could get his products on the cruise ships right here. Colgate soups is what I'm saying. Look for the Creole Festival and the Carnival. We might have at least 10,000 people in the street of Roseau. Do we have enough washrooms, sitting area? For instance, look at the old abandoned place between DBS. That's supposed to be a nice sitting environment for the visitors to sit and have a good meal, friendly. Those little things, if we cannot do it, like the guy said, that then people don't come for some of those things we want to give them. I work in tourism. You see, when the High Commissioner from England, who based in Barbados, he going down the road, he see a sugar cane by the road and a cocoa beans on the pulp. Is that he stopping and buying? When they was filming Pirates of the Caribbean, you know where Johnny Depp and Orlando Blue was hanging out? In a little Rastaman place down in Bonn. A little Echo place. It's just when you're going down towards Portsmouth, you drive in, wait at some old ice cream shops. That's where they was hanging out. And you know why they love there? When they was eating, the birds would fly from the trees and come and eat in the plate. Exactly what Sam is saying. I experienced, they don't experience nowhere. But Sam, I don't know, it's people like you know, and people like the other people that can talk, that have to talk. Because you have money in the bank for small business as something. But we don't buy a property in Roseau for the manufacturer to sell the products for the tourists. And Mackenzie do it. European Union bring money down, they train us, as Sam saying. We get training from the European Union, you know. And as Kenny saying, after the banana industry job, Mackenzie former buy Dominica products because we all get training there. And they never take it serious. We in another world. And we want to talk about tourism. The people that have to talk about tourism, we don't allow them.
Scholar, you need to wrap
Have a good
up.
night.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know Sam and Kenny, some good points that the caller made in reference to tourism and how we must take our responsibilities. What do you have in that development of tourism? As we all speak, we all types of people speaking about tourism. How do we now take our responsibilities outside of central government, outside of the private sector? How do we now take our responsibilities to ensure that we see some good, meaningful development in tourism?
I'll wait and I'll let Sam answer that because I want to ask.
I like the point that he alluded to in terms of, and you're speaking to Cecil, because we like to say in tourism, it's everybody's business. And it can't be something that happens in isolation, especially in Dominica's tourism model. Because our tourism is the tourism where you mingle. You mingle with nature, you mingle with people. You didn't come to Dominica to stay in an enclosed place else. You would go someplace else, quite frankly. And the island is so sparse, and the nature is so beautiful, and you want to be in a forest by yourself. But safety becomes, a major concern, more so here than other places. So we need to really look at safety. And I like his idea because, starting with Roseau, Portsmouth, the other places where our visitors frequently congregate, and elsewhere, that we need to have proper, even auxiliary police assistance. But the people need to understand, everybody need to understand that, your action is either going to sabotage the island or it's going to help to boost it, one or the other. And whether it is, as we're speaking about security, which is high in everyone's mind, you come to an island for fun and excitement, you shouldn't be worried, especially in Dominica, about someone stealing your things or harassing you or some other crime, violent crime especially. So we need to that's our responsibility. And then the garbage, those are the two primary things. And I hear people complain about it, about the garbage on the roadside and uncollected trash. And, so that's the government's responsibility. the trash collection, but
Both
we
the-
have personal
both the government-
responsibility.
all right. that's
We
correct.
have our response. So we can.
right.
We always like to talk about them, the government. They not doing.
Yes.
But what about us?
Us.
What about us that's driving and we eating something and we throw the thing outside? I walk every morning. I do a 5-mile hike.
So just
if
hold
you
that
know
thought.
me in Sophia. And every morning I'm picking up garbage on the roadside. I mean, it hurt. And this is our island. This is our living room. And how can we as a people be proud about the nature island and we so comfortable just throwing things out? We go to an event, Cecil. My goodness, please, before we leave, let's try to ensure that we push for proper sanitation and carnival. If it's an official event, then we should have bins all around and some kind of collection system that we're not throwing it in the ground first and expecting some NEP worker
so let's-
to come and pick it up. So I put it out here. Our mindset, we need to be of that mindset, and those things are little things, but they have a huge impact on our.
Let's go to the
tourism
telephone,
product.
Kenny, before you answer, because person on the line for a while. Good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, good evening, Cecil. Sorry.
Evening.
I think we have a number of great minds in Dominica. And the same way we are talking about not utilizing what we have is a concern. Because I'm listening to this program, and I'm listening to Mr. Green and Mr. Raphael. And they have been sharing so much. I'm suggesting that at the opening of Parliament, because our politicians, I don't want to say that. I'm not here to criticize what I'm saying. That our politicians don't really have all the answers. But when you have great minds like Mr. Raphael and Mr. Green, when we are presenting a budget, we're talking about fiscal incentives and the package and everything it constitutes. We should have these great minds address parliaments on ecotourism and the way we can go forward, because they are sharing so much, and the Lakou program is not enough to facilitate or to educate our people, and that's what we lack: education. Good program.
Thank
Thumbs
you.
up to Mr. Green and Mr. Raphael. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kenny, let's move a little bit into the CBI program.
No, before that, Cecil, I'd like to, the guy who called, I suspect it's the same guy who left the message about the IT, the value of IT and BPO, etc., and why it's not being discussed as part of a way forward or part of the economic future. So I'd like to just address that. IT is changing very, very quickly. The advent or the development of AI and AGI is going to create some real big issues in the future for investments that are being made now and have been made in the past. It's going to change BPO. So, for example, the call centers, that's where BPO falls under. AI is increasingly going to start to take the place of human operators. So we have to think a little bit more creatively, and I think we have one thing that an investment has been made in, which is the geothermal, in which we can look at the actual raw computing power for AI, which is the data centers. So we may have opportunities there to be able to solicit business to actually take advantage of the extra capacity that we can generate from our geothermal, because we won't be able to utilize it. We just don't have the amount of usage right now. But AI will allow us to do that. Other IT initiatives, even coding. It's sad to say so, but coding is going to be a very it's going to be a downward trend career, in my opinion, simply because AI is starting to replace developers. AI platforms are right now generating code even in Python. And ironically, it's only legacy platforms like Fortran and COBOL, the old platforms, that you have legacy developers being left to be able to do that. But at some point, AI is going to replace them as well. So just to say to the caller that we have to be very careful about putting in investment into IT infrastructure without looking at the ongoing trends.
So are you saying that AI is going to be a threat to our economic system, or is it going to be an advantage?
It's going to be
us?
a threat to certain things like BPO, like Clear Harbor. It's going to be a threat because even right now, the investment the Americans are making, particular Larry Ellison and Oracle and Jeff Bezos at Amazon, and even Zuckerberg, is going to make much of the outsourcing to India, which is being done for most of the BPO, it's going to make them redundant. So we have to be very careful about investing in platforms and technology that in 5 to 10 years are going to be wiped out.
Banking also.
Banking in every possible field you can think of, because unfortunately, what we call techno-feudalism, where you have a group of very, very wealthy people who can actually put down investment into infrastructure that can reduce the reliance on real human beings. That's what's happening. And so in Dominica, we do have one very valuable component, which is the potential usage of our energy. And that can be a way forward. I'm not saying to the caller that there won't be avenues for technology training and technology outsourcing, but unfortunately, I can tell you it's going to become less and less.
So what do you make yourself and Sam, what do you now make of a game changer, which is geothermal into Dominica by this year? What do you all make of it?
You want to start, John?
Yeah, well, that's full disclosure. I'm on the DOMLEC board, and we are excited at DOMLEC at this initiative, and we want to commend the government and all those involved for making this a reality. At one point, it was just a dream, and we know that we are a short way away from maybe within a month or so from getting close to 50% of our energy from geothermal, a renewable source. So that's a pretty big deal. And ultimately, we hope that it will drive down the cost of electricity. It's not going to happen in a big way right away because there's a lot of upfront costs. And Cecil, you're on the board of DOMLEC too, so even though you're not, you kind of understand where we are. But ultimately, it will lead to the reduction in the cost of energy, and the cost of energy is a significant component in the cost of doing business in Dominica. And so this is going to be a big news. Also, from a public relations standpoint, we are talking about sustainable energy. And if we are to project and present ourselves as a nature island, it certainly helps our image from a marketing standpoint to say, well, we're getting about 25% of our energy from hydroelectric and about 50% from geothermal. That's about 70% of our energy from renewable. No place around can compete with that.
Correct.
So I think it certainly helps from a marketing perspective, with our product in terms of tourism and the nature island, and it also in terms of reliability too, for energy. Sometimes we 2 years ago we had some challenges with our electricity. We were let's be honest, it was not. We had a lot of blackouts and a lot of times load shedding. That I didn't even want to use that term. Load shedding, Dominicans don't like that term. So we had a lot of periods where our electricity was less consistent. It's gotten better now. I have to say, considering the transition to from Emera to the government, and Emera ran the company until it didn't have anything left effectively in terms of the equipment, and so they had reached the end of their cycle, handed it to the government, and a lot of people figured that DOMLEC was going to go south from there, and it's been turned around. So I think this is a bright spot for Dominicans to say, this is pretty good. And we talk about things that need to be improved. Also, I hope on this program too that we can talk about some of the good things that has happened, some of the positive things. So there's always a balance.
Yes. So let's go to the telephone call quickly.
Yeah.
Good evening, caller.
What about Cecil?
Good evening.
You see, in Dominica now, right? We Dominican have a mindset of a selfish mindset. You know, we leave and we go overseas, we go to different countries, but we don't want people to come into Dominica. You know, and this is a mentality that we have. We need to change. My other point is that now we have geothermal. What about crypto? Because we got the current to harvest it. I'd like to hear a little more on that. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you. Nice question from the caller, crypto. We know that it's now been used in a number of countries worldwide. Guys, especially Sam, you're involved in the service sector. Will you accept cryptos?
Well, we don't have the capacity to accept crypto at this point. We're really banking options in Dominica. Conventional banking options are very limited. And maybe Kenny...
I'm sure Kenny would have a different view on that.
I'm not as big on crypto as people think. There's a difference between being able to accept it, which I think he can do right now if he uses the right technology. He doesn't need to use an indigenous bank for that. But that's another question. That's another whole rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. So the availability and the use of crypto and utilizing the technology is something that I think can happen. The problem is that in terms of life cycle, crypto is still young, and we don't know where it will go to next. But in terms of actually being able to accept it, there are two ways, obviously, that it becomes, how do you put it, accepted by the ECCB. And we always have to remember when we talk about Dominica and things like certain technologies, that we're not on our own. We're part of a regional body, and we have a central bank that has to give regulatory oversight over these technologies. And until the central bank opens up to it and crypto and allows the individual indigenous banks to accept it, it won't happen. So yeah, crypto, any Dominican can get, can have a crypto account and have a card and use it anywhere that it's accepted. But to get it acceptable here, we need the ECCB to give guidance on it.
And to put it in perspective, I haven't had any clients asked to pay for their hotel stay using crypto. Mm-hmm. So it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. So
it's a non-issue now.
Right. No, I'm not saying it's something we can't look at, but yes. I'm just saying practically in terms of things that are affecting us right now.
Sam,
I want to question right now.
You stimulated my mind in terms of the geothermal energy and seeing that you're part. Well, I know certain things you may not be able to disclose, seeing that you're a member of the board and Cecil being another member of the board. In terms of this geothermal, how real is this? How real is that geothermal?
It's real like your name is. It's real like your name is Adam. No, it's real.
No, don't jump.
No. I'm not saying to you. It's real like your name is Hartly Adams.
Right. I'm Sam. Is it a myth? Is it something that we expect would be on the grid in the next couple of months? What is
couple weeks, not months.
How far are we?
I think hearing you ask that question, maybe I'll go back to the board. Maybe we need to do a little more PR and educate and sensitize the public, because it's not even coming, it's here actually.
Well, because
the plant is operating. It's in Loda. It's anyone can
Where is
go
it,
and
Sam?
see.
Where is it? Tell the Dominican public. Where is it? Because a lot of people said it was just an imagination.
No, but I mean,
but you should be able to tell us.
You can do that. You can tell them.
You would have seen. You would have seen the works. You would have seen the works from Loda to now the Funkole plant. Which is going to provide
and the distribution has been worked on the Trafalgar Road. You see, there's been a lot of work on it, so it's coming, and it's something that's going to benefit
the entire country.
The country, based on certainly the things that I said about it. Right. So, anybody have any questions? They can take a look drive
So,
up there and
so
see
we
for
need to have a
themselves.
little more PR so we can get to know. Because if a person like me asking those questions,
Right.
what about the
I want,
average
I want
Dominican?
to agree with you that I think that Domlec, the company, is not doing sufficient public relation in making people be more aware of the program. I think it is already, we can almost say it's 98% there.
Well, I'm putting you on the spot
Which
because
is?
I hear you on the apex of that organization, and Sam, to put all your money where all your mouth is, put let the public know at every stage of the development where we are and how soon we're expecting things to happen. Le bon dit bon. If it wasn't good, everybody would be hearing about it.
Yes.
So I want to hear more about it. You
All right.
call.
No. Kenny, earlier on I spoke to you about yourself and Sam are both involved in the CBI program, the Citizen by Investment program. Tell us where the program is at this time.
You want me to say? It's in a transitionary phase. Sam has been in the business longer than I am, more so as a developer. I come from the agent side of the business. It's in a transitionary phase in that the world, citizenship by investment depends on government oversight in many different jurisdictions and support in others. And with geopolitical changes, so too there are demands on changes within citizenship by investment. Is there still demand for it? Huge demand. And this cycle will continue. In many ways, we have to have a consistent view of the changes and what is required at any particular point in time, because the cycle will change again. And I'll give a little example. In Spain had a golden visa, and that golden visa was extremely popular, especially amongst people from the Philippines and certain other Southeast Asian countries, especially countries which had some level of Spanish colonization, which a lot of people don't know. Filipinos were colonized by Spain, and even their Tagalog, their language, actually has a lot of Spanish words in it. Then a leftist government came into power last early 2025, and they got rid of the golden visa. And one of the reasons they got rid of the golden visa, they said that it was raising the price of property because their golden visa program was related to real estate investment. So they canceled the golden visa. Why? Because from a policy shift as a government, they went from a right-wing government to a left-wing government who said we need housing to be more affordable for citizens. However, just recently, the Spanish government has announced a program to bring in, to bring in around 50,000, or is it 500,000? I must check the numbers again. Migrants, to basically give them visas to settle in Spain. And that has been seen as a policy shift, which may result in a right-wing government coming back into power and then bringing back the golden visa. So if you understand what I'm saying, is that there are ebbs and flows in the industry, but the overall premise, which is that there are people all over the world, and if you hear myself and Sam's voice cracking up, is because the studio is cold. There's that premise. That premise doesn't change, that there are people all over the world who require second citizenships for a variety of options, and to increase both their mobility and their living standards. And that's not going to change. So it's a case of having to go through a storm, and in times like these, you need strong and dedicated communication at a policy level between governments, and you need leadership that understands that you don't panic and you stay steady to what the core themes are of what you're doing. So yeah.
So certainly, CBI has provided a significant source of revenue for 5 OECS countries, certainly over the past 10 years. A significant source of revenue. And recently, it has seen some challenges to the program, the foundation of the program in the Caribbean, and certainly to the ability to raise funds. And we don't know what the end game is going to be with respect to the CBI. I don't think the citizenship by investment, but CBI program, as Kenny suggested, it started in St. Kitts and it spread, and Dominica was one of the early players in the game. But now it's such a big global industry, so many countries, and it's very competitive, and the CBI programs in the Caribbean are under specific threats from the EU and the US and so on. So we just don't know, but it's still providing some revenue. We are seeking to develop our international airport as a result. I think that's sort of maybe the big concern. We have done so much work with respect to the runway and the terminal, and it's sort of half completed. We certainly would like to be able to at least complete that project under the CBI program. CBI was never intended to be a permanent industry. It was always something that was coming in to give us a boost. So it's always been under threat, Kenny, but it's just, every time you think it's over, it's just lasted. And so fortunately for us, we've been able to continue to get revenue from it. So where is it going to go? I don't think any of us can accurately predict. But it certainly has seen better days than it's seeing now.
I want to ask Kenny and yourself in reference to the CBI program, because many people speak like it's just Dominica, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Grenada, and I think Barbados that are involved in the Caribbean, in the CBI program, Citizen by Investment program. What about the Metropolitan? Is there a program in the United States? Is there a program in Europe? Can you help us as persons who have been involved and would maybe have a better answer for us? Can you give us an understanding as to what's going on out there?
So in the Caribbean, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, and Grenada are the 5 OECS countries. Barbados never had a CBI program, and St. Vincent hasn't. St. Vincent, as a result of the change in government, indicated that there's an interest in moving towards having a CBI program. In terms of outside of the region, my goodness, there's got to be, Kenny, at least 40 countries with CBI programs.
And every month there's a new one launching.
Yeah, the United States does not have a citizenship by investment program. The United States, they have invest immigration programs. Now, citizenship by investment is full citizenship. That's different than residency or investor immigration programs. The United States, they have an investor immigration program. It's traditionally called, under the employment-based EB-5 under U.S. statute. The EB-5 program basically would, for I think about $1 million US, you can get an automatic green card under the program. So that's their program. So it's not citizenship, it's residency by investment that they offer. And there's a whole range of countries that have residency by investment.
Does that give an opportunity later on?
Yes, there's a pathway to citizenship when you get your, but you don't get full citizenship under those programs.
Grenada also has something called the E2 treaty visa.
Correct.
Along with Turkey and a few other countries. And Grenada got it after the...
as a result of the invasion.
It was kind of like, sorry, we
to
did
assist
this.
to boost Grenadians, and there's a program where they can get a special arrangement for immigration if you have Grenadian citizenship. So a number of people have entered the CBI program in Grenada to become Grenadian
But
citizenship
they've closed the
to
loophole.
segue into the U.S. Well, they did, and so it's a moving target. The CBI program, it's still operating right now. There's still business, but certainly not as much as we were getting before. And right now, we'll see how far it goes. We have some projects, private sector hotel developments that's being developed under the CBI that's still ongoing. Hopefully, we can get those completed. And certainly, the big elephant in the room is that airport. Hopefully, especially now where you have major, geopolitical challenges. Hopefully, we can get that airport completed before anything, if anything negative is to happen to that CBI program.
I think also, Sam, it bears noting that the airport is the largest infrastructure project in the history
Correct.
of Dominica, but also I don't think there's any country in the world that has developed an airport under citizenship by investment. I don't know if you can think of anyone.
I can. And again, the airport, because our economy is so small, it would have been difficult to develop the airport under any kind of other financing arrangement. It wouldn't make sense for the IMF. It wouldn't make sense. The repayment of that investment, if we were to borrow money to do it, it would make it probably prohibitive. So the CBI was one that it appeared at the time to be a very good option to develop the airport under, and so we are midway through the construction of the airport. I don't know exactly, the dates. I think initially was around 2027 for the
27.
physical construction. I don't know how close we are to that. Time is of the essence. We really need to get that airport completed, and most of us will feel more relief, even from an environmental standpoint with that airport. Certainly, I'm on record. I like nature. I want to keep the island as it is. I want to even regreen the island. But you cannot have development. You have to have some compromise for development. And we made a decision to build that airport in the north, in Wesley, and the path of the runway. I fly over it maybe twice a month. I see the progress. There's a lot of work that has been in place there and a lot of earth movement. It would just be quite unfortunate if we did not have the financing to complete that airport, considering all that had been done to it. So for me personally, as someone in tourism and someone rooting for the growth of sustainable tourism in Dominica, I'd certainly like to see that airport completed.
So
as quickly as
Kenny,
possible.
I would like to know, and I'm sure there are listeners out there who would like to know, what are the concerns that the Europeans and the Americans had in reference to the CBI, just to give some clarification on the matter.
Okay, so the concerns that exist. Remember where we were historically. All right, and remember what I said earlier. We are being regulated by people we compete with, and I can say this again. I'm not a politician. Many right now, in particular in Europe is facing a situation where they're seeing a lot of capital flight, meaning that many of the middle class and wealthy are leaving Europe, in particular Germany. Why? Because you've had mass migration. It's ironic. You've had mass migration coming into those countries, especially from Ukraine because of the war, and previously from Syria and Libya and Iraq. And what has happened is that's put a huge tax burden on the middle class and the wealthy in those countries. So many of these people are looking to diversify and move to other parts of the world to be able to reduce their dependence on Europe in itself. And Europe, like any sovereign body, is concerned about the loss of those high net worths as tax citizens in their jurisdiction. And so therefore we are facing the same pressures, for example, that Cayman will face in offshore banking, because it's simply another path for people to diversify their financial portfolio. That's the biggest pressure that we face right now. And so I can say this, within all of the codified language of we need better standards and we need higher standards of due diligence, the truth is, and Sam can tell you this, our programs in the Caribbean have far more due diligence than any of the other programs elsewhere. Far more. Personally, I wouldn't do it if it was me, because it's too intrusive. You have to do all of your medical tests. You have to do source of funds financing, source of funds disclosure. You have to get police and Interpol records from every jurisdiction you've lived in for any particular concerted period of time. The documents are extensive. Now, there are other parts to it, like the biometric harmonization, which I heard the Prime Minister speak about, which is essential. You know, your biometric standards changing by jurisdiction. And, for example, the Americans might say, we want your biometrics to match ours. But in terms of the actual due diligence, we have very stringent standards. However, there is something that nobody can guarantee. You do not know what happens in the future. And that's a deficiency of anything. It happened with the Alan Stanford. You mentioned Alan Stanford. When Alan Stanford started in the Caribbean, he met the royal family in the UK. He hobnobbed with the rich and famous everywhere. No one put down Alan Stanford as a scam artist. But the minute he became persona non grata, then everyone pulled away. This happens across the world. The thing about it is that the CBI program, like any other thing that has a spot in time where it actually does financial checks and checks on people, it cannot predict the future. Today, Sam is here with us. He's an upstanding citizen. He's a great guy. Tomorrow you find out that he ran over someone's pet dog and he's a horrible monster, you know. And again, I mean, we're making light of it, but that's a reality. And so those are the kind of things that we have to face, because when you're dealing with all of the situations, you have to be able to put that into context. I mean, I'll give you an example again. You don't look at the United States and look at all of the people, the guy from Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy Bernie Madoff, Ivan Botsky, Michael Milken, people who went way beyond the radar of the SEC in the United States and committed huge financial crimes. They were part of the infrastructure of the US financial system, the European financial system, the UK financial system, until one day they were found out to be doing irregular things. Well, from what I've seen, the due diligence and the standards that we have are top notch. However, we are at an unfortunate inflection point that has happened in everything that we've done over the last 30 years.
We might need this for recording purposes. So yeah. All right. So what about you, Sam?
Cecil, our revenue from CBI is probably going to be reduced considerably in the future. It may be that it may continue to be there, but we would just receive less over time or there may be some event that would cause the falling off a cliff one way or the other. And knowing that you're heading south, I think it is important for us to focus on, thinking about life beyond CBI and looking at the future and building an economy in Dominica that maybe is more sustainable than CBI. CBI was never meant to be a permanent source of revenue. If it was, the government would just use it and pay direct payroll and act like it's a tax dollar, and it doesn't operate that way. And so, but we have to start looking at, and certainly the CBI, for instance, the hotel that I operate, it was CBI funded, but we no longer get any subsidies or funding or anything from CBI, and we're able to have a sustainable economy. In addition to the employees, we can buy stuff from maybe 75 other farmers and people around. So all of a sudden you've got over 200 families earning a livelihood directly and other spin-offs. So the CBI programs, I can attest where I am, and certainly those that are operating and are successful, you can see that they have indeed produced, sustainable economic activity and employment, and even where we've had to rebuild our infrastructure. Dominica hasn't just been sitting in a perfect plane for the past decade. Remember, we had an issue with the IMF, a few years ago, and we had to recover from economic challenges, and we had issue with Tropical Storm Erica. I know that firsthand, where that was really devastating to a significant part of our GDP on the island physically, and people still reeling from that. And then shortly after that, we got Hurricane Maria, and then that was really devastating. And I tell you, I was shaken up. I haven't even talked much about Hurricane Maria and the impact. I'm looking at Dominica after Hurricane Maria. We had started to rebuild Jungle Bay, but my goodness, I didn't, I couldn't see far beyond that because of the devastation that we had to come from. And then COVID and the economic impact of COVID. It wasn't a hurricane, but in 2 years, it basically shut the island down. So we've come from a very difficult place, and we have to at least acknowledge that the CBI has been very helpful to get us through this 10-year period that could have been, it didn't have to end up where we could have at least been, we are where we are now, which it could have been much worse, let's say. So we have to be grateful for that, but we cannot sit back and say, and assume that it will keep coming. We have to get busy on building this economy, assuming the worst, and if better happens, then good, but we really need to get our hands to the plow and look at things we can do to improve the island, to move the island forward. And I dare say there are things within reach. We just need to come together and sit down and get doable things that we can finance. Maybe some of the things aren't very expensive. We like to think of big buildings when we think of development, and it may be things that don't even cost much money, but we just have to change the way in which we do things to end up advancing the country, in a positive way.
I'm happy that you said that, Sam, and the reason why I'm saying that is when we started the program on limes. Then we moved to the banana industry. Then we moved to the service sector. Then we moved to the economic sector, sector. And now we went to the CBI. And you're telling us that in terms of economic viability, we got to do all what we got to do for through the CBI for the development of Dominica. The airport, the international airport, is it the alternative for the CBI?
I think it's very different. I don't think it's the alternative for CBI, but I don't know. I can't foretell the future. I don't have
I'm asking that question, Sam, on the backdrop of, yes, agriculture was one. Then it moved to the service sector, which is different from agriculture. Then it moved from the service sector into finance, the finance sector, which is totally different from. So I'm saying all of them will be different, but how we have dealt with it or how we'll be dealing with it will determine, the success. And that's why I'm asking if the airport is an alternative. Yes, Sam.
I'm very happy that Sam raised the idea, because no matter what we do in Dominica, we cannot run away from agriculture. No matter what we do, we must eat to survive, because we see what's happening around the world. Our agriculture is very important to us, and I noticed that quite a lot of investment is being put into agriculture in terms of being able not only to export it, but we have to feed our people, because we notice that the cost of agricultural products around the world, especially with fertilizer now, with the Ukraine war, those things are going to get more expensive. we have to also look at the question of oil, because oil is playing a very important role now in terms of what I see, in terms of stifling countries, in terms of getting oil within certain regions. So that again, our energy is very important in terms of our geothermal. So I think with the CBI, the decline of the CBI and the hotels and the infrastructures that we are creating is to enable us to move away from a dependence on that CBI. And as you said, historically, moving from different crops, vanilla, tobacco, sugar, whatever, as the world changes, we have to adapt. Because if we don't adapt, we cannot survive. So that's why I always like the word sustainable development. Sam, what do you think of sustainable development as it relates to Dominica?
Again, well, sustainable development is a big catch-all phrase. Huh? Sustainable means that it's ongoing. And Cecil, going back to your point with respect to the airport as sort of, agriculture and bananas, especially, coming from there to CBI, and now would the airport be able to replace that? I think they're three very different things, so I wouldn't put them in the same category. Certainly, we expect to have some economic stimulus from the airport, because the airport now will be able to accommodate more visitors coming in. We will still need the rooms. We don't have enough hotel rooms to attract the type of flights that we will need to have coming into Dominica. We don't have the size of economy to get that. So we don't have the number of people that are prepared to move. What's our population target? If we had 200,000 people, then we can have a conversation. People need to move back and forth, especially people that are a higher income, that maybe working remotely in Dominica and so on. So we're not just depending on tourism. Also, the airport could be a tool for regional agricultural exports, especially, or international agricultural exports. You've got cut flowers you can sell in Europe and the United States. You can export high value agricultural products, certainly in the region. I don't mean to suggest in any way, and I'm a tourism person, but I believe in a certain type of agriculture. We can compete in the international banana trade, but there are niche agricultural products that we can compete in, and certainly you start closest to home. If you're going to have a hotel in Dominica, the people come to Dominica, they expect to eat things that are grown locally, and it makes it taste better, and you can have farm tours and so on. So certainly there's integration of agriculture and tourism. And even on the regional level, a lot of our people in the region, you may not have the water we have in Dominica or whatever, we can certainly produce more for the region on that level. So there's certainly scope for but we must be niche, and we must be very targeted, and we must be able to find the labor to be able to make that agriculture work. So certainly in terms of sustainability, this speaks to it, because we're talking agriculture that's linked to tourism, that's linked to all the different sectors of the economy. And now we have a more vibrant and robust economy where we have sufficient numbers, that the same way we don't want to over-depend on CBI. I'm big on tourism, but I don't want to over-depend on tourism or over-depend on any one thing, because something can happen. I was on an airplane, not too long ago, and I couldn't get off because they shut the airspace down for 48 hours or something like that. Everything shut down. And so are we going to exclusively depend on tourism? And if something like this were to happen, how do we eat? And so we need to have a more balanced economy. Balance, like you have a portfolio. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And so I think, Mr. Hartly, when we speak of a sustainable economy, that's one that's strong because it has diversity and balance.
Sam mentioned something earlier, though. I mean, I'm not trying to throw water on or put rain on your parade. So
please do.
No, I was just saying that. I mean, we spoke about when I moved back here. When I came, there was a stab levy. That was part of the IMF Structural Adjustment Program. Mm-hmm. Then you had the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
Then you had Erica.
But before that, we had another.
the trough
Right,
in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
You had Erica, you had Maria, then you had COVID. Countries, I mean, Dominica doesn't exist in some kind of smooth sailing linear process. I think if I had to look back, probably the most how do you put it? Stable period was between 2005 and 2008. Up until 2008, our trajectory was really, really good at that time. And then, as I said, the financial crisis hit and it just threw everything off. And this was, by the way, something we didn't create in the Caribbean. This was a crisis that was just basically created based on the sale of toxic mortgage products at the time in the United States.
Try to get to the mic.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that going forward, when we talk about sustainable, I don't believe anything is sustainable in these small islands. We are trying our best to build platforms that can be readily used and managed. But to say that they're sustainable suggests that we're in control of the dynamics, and we're not.
What about offshore universities? What do you think of that?
Offshore universities are very viable. I mean, Ross was a very strong component of of our economy in the past. The American Canadian School has started, and they're growing slowly. I mean, many people did not think Ross would have turned into anything back then, and that's another part of history that people don't realize, that there was a lot of obstacles back in the day, and even we lost the nursing and the vet school because back then we refused to give further concessions to Robert Ross to allow him to keep them here, and they moved to St. Kitts, and people don't talk about that, but that's all part
But that's a
of
good
history.
point, because in that period, Ken, if you remembered, that Ross was owing us something like $6 million in taxes, and we actually frustrated Ross until I think Mike Douglas, may so rest in peace, came and decided that he has to fight for the Ross University and make it stay alive. So that's a very good point that you're making here tonight, Kenny.
But the thing about it, as a nation, small Caribbean countries are I mentioned it earlier, external shocks, and external shocks can be as simple as, and you spoke about the offshore university recently, Grenada had a travel alert put on them by the U.S. State Department, upping their level of risk to a level 2. And that's unprecedented. Grenada is one of the safest countries in the world. But Grenada also has St. George's University, which has almost 10,000 students. So imagine if that alert was to have gone up even further. That could just decimate their university.
Let's go to the telephone quickly. Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, Cecil.
Good evening. And thank you for holding on.
Contribution again tonight. Again, a wonderful, can you hear me? Wonderful Lakou discussion this night. Now, we were talking about the other components in terms of growing the economy in Dominica. One of the things I think that constrains Dominica is population growth. We do not have a large consumer base or consumption base. And I know recently there were talks about bringing in deportees and people who are up in arms, and before the Prime Minister mentioned saying that we got to have more kids. Dominica needs to have more people. Our population needs to grow. We need to have 100 plus. So for the type of growth and development and consumption that we're talking, for us to see that successful, thriving industry in Dominica. Any thoughts on that, guys?
100% agree with you.
Thank you.
Have we ever thought...
Thank you.
Let me ask the question. We're talking about importing people coming, migrants or whatever. Have we ever thought in terms of increasing our fertility rate? Have we ever thought of putting policies in place to give more incentives to women making more children? Is that a possibility? Because women don't want to make children unless they have the support or the support base.
I think Cecil has made
I've passed my
his
quota.
biggest contribution.
I've made my quota. I've made my quota. So that won't be for me. I've made my quota. Sam, a good laugh. A good laugh, Sam. A good laugh.
So there's policy and there's capability. Huh? And I say this in half jest, but what the caller said is real. As I said, this is my soapbox on this item. You have to put policy in place to be able to say we have a problem. So, for example, Bermuda has said we need 8,000 people over the next 5 years. And they've stated it and they're going about it.
8,000 workers.
Sorry,
Plus
to be
the
corrected.
family, yeah.
So, if you know you have a problem, and the population, so in Dominica, we don't seem to have a grasp of the problem because, you'll hear people say, oh, there's so many Chinese here. Wrong. There's very few Chinese people here. Oh, the place is overrun with Haitians. Even when we had a lot of Haitians there were still not more than 5,000 Haitians. Very small populations. So we have to have a reality check because whether it is farming, whether it is the medical community, whether it is the retail sector, whether it is tourism, because, we're looking at let's say 2 years, we have a fully functional airport. What's going to happen when you have 1,000 people coming here a week? Our service sector it's naturally going to happen. It's going to happen organically. People are going to come to Dominica because you won't have enough people to service the service sector. Not because there aren't enough bodies on island, but because you need people who are trained. Now, yes, you can say you can have hospitality centers and hospitality schools, but you have to have a chain of events in terms of having people ready to occupy those positions. So yes, we have a serious issue that we have to solve.
So you think, Kenny, the visa-free entry to the people of the Dominican Republic is a good idea?
I think any visa-free entry for nationals who are willing to come and live and work in Dominica is a good idea. But I don't think that's enough. That's just a tip of the iceberg. What you need is actual policy to say we're going to create an RBI where you're going to have people who are going to come and settle here and be part of the consumption economy. And then at another level, you can have workers' visas for people who want to work in the medical community, for agriculture, etc. I don't, for example, believe that Haitians are the panacea for the agricultural industry.
Why do you say that? Are they leaving when they come? Because two things can happen, and we have to talk about it here. What I notice is that many Haitians who come to work in the field of agriculture normally sometimes leave through the back door. You expected them to remain and they migrate unexpectedly. What I think needs to happen, and that's my opinion, I mean, get a lot of blues for that. There needs to be a policy, and that's where we're coming, in terms of a certain time frame, like what we do in terms of the United States when Dominicans go to cut sugar cane or to pick grapes or apples, where there's a period of time where they would have to remain on the farms. There would have to be a policy in place for a certain specific time. Otherwise, we might just be using Dominica as another point of entry for migration to neighboring islands. Because what I notice is quite of the number of Haitians who have been there migrate either to Guadeloupe, St. Martin, or other jurisdiction within the Caribbean, eventually to end up in the United States. What are we going to do in terms of that policy? So we really need to have an established policy. If the farmers want X, or like Sam, he needs a certain amount of people, what is the policy? I'm sending that question to you, my brother.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the government actually has put in a policy for farm labor, which is linked to the Haitians, to the Haitian community. I'm just saying that the Haitian community aren't the panacea for the farming industry, because there are two aspects of farming life in Dominica. There is farm labor, which is unskilled farm labor at the lowest level, where you need people to clear fields and to dig beds and do other labor tasks which now local labor is unwilling to do. And then there's another level where you need supplemental farmers, and that's the layer which is more difficult, because as much as the government puts things in place, the issue that we have in Dominica is trying to be able to have the intelligence to tell us whether someone is misrepresenting themselves as a farmer or not. And often, because people want to come from these countries to Dominica, they'll say that they have skills that they don't have, and you only find out when it's too late. So those are real problems that policymakers have to deal with. They're not simple issues.
When we think of agriculture, too often we look in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I think we think of the traditional type of agricultural practices where you need a lot of unskilled labor. I mean, if we are to look forward, Dominica has an abundance of water. It's one of the few water surplus islands in the Caribbean. You've got vertical farming through hydroponics. You're talking about higher technology type farming that would require less labor per se and more technical skills to farm to be able to produce competitively. And that now is entrepreneurial farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when we talk about farming and agriculture, we need to be careful that we're not just speaking about the old traditional back-breaking type farmers. We will need, certainly,
Still need it.
low-end people, but we'll also need to attract entrepreneurs to Dominica, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in tourism, whether it's in other services. We need restaurants, people that can run very interesting restaurants so people can have a place to eat. We need all kinds of services to drive an economy. So I think in terms of Mr. Adams, is your question in terms of agriculture and a sustainable economy, I think that we cannot tonight, we can throw out ideas, but we can't really come up with policy, and I don't think it's our role right now.
Yeah.
But we've thrown some things out to get the conversation going. Certainly, I think we've spoken tonight. I think we're all in agreement, at least in the studio, on the need to expand the population of Dominica. I think that message needs to go forward, and we need to sensitize the public, and we need to, this kind of myopic anti-immigrant sentiment. We have more Dominicans per capita living in other people's places than virtually any other country.
Just talk about the region.
We can't
in
be,
the region.
People still, this anti-immigrant thing, we have helped to develop other people's economy too much. Invite other people, enable them to come the same way to help develop our economy, because there's demand for people. I mean, we live in a paradise in Dominica. Mm-hmm. There is demand for people. They want to work abroad, and everything that's happening globally, you can come and live in this peaceful place. Let's create the environment.
But Sam, how do we erase from the minds of people that farm agriculture work is almost slavery? To remind people sometimes that we are going back in time in terms of slavery.
I think we need some successful examples, Cecil, and that changes minds. We can talk about things, and yeah, it sounds good, but we go back to what we know, what we see, what we recall. I think it's just some good models of successful modern-day farming in Dominica, and you just need to get some entrepreneurs that are prepared to come in here, that have the capacity and to make some of these things happen. And then you find local people then can replicate it, because you may not have the know-how, but when you see someone come in and they're able to grow lettuce at half the cost that you can grow lettuce at, in half the time, then you will certainly say, wait a second, and I will switch over. And I think that will help to spur the growth, the confidence in an alternative. But until we see the alternative, we don't, we think it's a pipe dream.
Kenny, I want to ask you that most of what we have spoken of tonight, we are actually talking about the adults. How much in this, all of this, we are seeing the young people working towards helping in that development of Dominica?
That's a very good question. So I would take it slightly back. Okay, the things that the government has done very well. The education. When I grew up, you probably had 1-2 island scholars, and there were people who I went to school with. A couple of them, unfortunately, who have fallen on really hard times, who, if they were born in this era, would have gotten scholarships. Their lives would be totally different. I know at least 5 people I can just think off the top of my head, 2 of whom, really hard times, because it was very, very difficult, for people to get just scholarships to be able to go and study. So in that regard, there's been a lot of capacity created for people to go abroad and study. The criticism has been often laid in the past, but after they study, what jobs are there for them? Well, that's not what the role of an education is. The role of an education is to expand your mind, to be able to expand your boundaries. And yes, getting a job is one of them, but creating a job should be one of those roles too. And so being able to spend time, whether it's in the US or Canada, the UK, wherever you study, China, come back to Dominica at some point after cutting your teeth overseas and being able to create new value is supposed to be one of those things that the investment in education is supposed to do. And so that question, that's the answer, is that there's a personal responsibility that people have to take on themselves from having an education and not waiting for a job for them to come back to.
How much you think that brain drain is responsible for some of our ills, some of our setbacks?
He answers that question. Since I've been in education for over 38 years, the thing about it, when you get educated, many persons search for opportunities in terms of more money. Normally, when you have your bachelor's degree or your master's degree or your PhD, you always have the mindset of wanting to earn more money, because obviously your country will not be able to pay you that salary. 90% of our island scholars never came back. If they came back, maybe a year. And if we do the history, I can only identify about maybe 2 island scholars that remain on Dominica. They're all overseas, working. The question is that is a theory we had of patriotism. You have to love your country. You have to want to help develop your country. It's a mindset like the Chinese did. You have to have a mindset. So it's a whole culture that we have to develop within the education system, whereby people understand that yes, there's more money being offered out there, but how willing are you to develop your small life?
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to counter one point here. The fact that people do not come back to Dominica doesn't mean that they don't contribute, because the remittances are a large part of the economic sustainability of these countries. If you look at countries like Philippines, they tell you that their largest export is human resource, because if you look across the world in the service sector, Filipinos inhabit nearly every service sector. The hospitals in the UK and the US depend on Filipinos. The cruise ship industry, even in Bermuda, Sam, the tourism industry in Bermuda has a large amount of Filipinos. So Dominicans abroad do contribute. But to Cecil's question, when he asked what is the role that young people play in the development of Dominica, and it is just that. I think the last count, it's over 1,500 scholarships have happened over the last 10 years.
That's true.
there is a value of that education, and it's not just about being able to create a job for themselves, which when they create a job overseas, they can then earn foreign exchange, which they can send as remittances to their family. But some of them can come back to Dominica and contribute by thinking outside of the box and becoming players in the retail sector, in all kinds of sector, agriculture, tourism, you name it.
Kenny, you went away and you stayed away for 14 years?
Yeah.
And you came back. Well, I was a child when I was taken away.
You're kidnapped.
and I stayed a long time. But I say this to say, because someone gets a scholarship and they go and advance their studies and they meet someone and they get married and they may still come back. They may be developing. No, seriously. I mean, you see what I'm saying? I think when you provide an education for people, so if you're looking at a 10-year window and you figure, they're not going to come right back. I think they may add value through the experience they get. So when they come back, if I had come to Dominica right after I had gotten, through university, and I still don't think I could make the contribution that I made as a seasoned entrepreneur. So sometimes it's not just the education they're getting the experience and, that they can make a contribution. But instead of trying to force people to stay here and come back right away, I think you can try to attract people, and I think you'd probably be more successful if you put your effort in trying. Let's allow Dominicans to grow sometimes. I mean, if you give a scholarship to a young person, their income will probably go up to, be increased in a lifetime, Adams, you would know, by probably $1 million.
So is it no time?
So I think that's good to give them the scholarships, and I support that.
Is it
100%.
Is it no time, Sam and Kenny, that we should be able to set policies to utilize these people that we set out and installed? Because remember, we don't bond them. They're not being bonded, and how can we get them? How can we attract them? How can we place policies in place that can attract them?
A lot of times, they have a first degree, and quite frankly, they would be of greater value if they were more seasoned. So I don't think it's necessary to try to rush them to come back right away, going back. And I hate to be redundant on this. I think the focus needs to be on finding people that can fit the bill for what the economy needs right now. And this is where the conversation needs to be had. And we can, the same way, the people are educated. Well, get those people that want to leave where they are and have what we need to come down to Dominica. You don't have to be born in Dominica, I think, for your heart to be in Dominica and for you to love this country and want to develop it. And if that's who you are and that's what you want, I would say let's find a way to invite you in. Plus, let's seek to improve the enabling environment for those Dominicans that are seasoned, that are out there. Make them feel comfortable, some people feel for some reason. I was, welcome back in 1995. I had lived away, and if at that time the then Prime Minister hadn't, reached out to me to come back to Dominica, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you because I was not connected to Dominica at the time. And so certainly outreach is important to let people know whether they're Dominicans or others, that they're invited back home and that they are being thought of because policies are put in place to create a space for them so that they can thrive and achieve their potential. So I think this is where the focus is, instead of trying to force them, force them to come back. Let them get some experience. That's okay, and you can't lose by supporting a young Dominican, whether they ever come back or whatever. If you can help your people, I think ultimately they may come back when they're 40 or even 50 years, and with that experience and that contribution you make will multiply anyway. So I don't think the government or Dominica can go wrong by supporting the education of its people through scholarships.
Yeah, and there are two facets to this whole thing about bonding them, because then you have to supplant people who are here and there's a whole dislocation process that you have to fine tune. I'm a big fan of data. I'd assume that the Ministry of Finance or Statistics are tracking the level of remittances that come into Dominica. I know they do. And it'll be interesting to see if there's a correlation with the increase in graduates and the amount of remittances that come back to the country. As bad as it may sound, there may be an advantage to people not coming back because someone who has a job who can remit a percentage of it is more valuable to their family and the economy than if they were to come back home and not be able to find a job, so to speak. All right. In the future, that will change. The investments, the thing about it is that the investments that are being made now, in particular the airport, the hotel sector, the marina, etc., they will only bear fruit in a 5 to 10 year span when you have more people coming to the country, more capacity, and then these people who have skill sets, hopefully, that can feed off the growth of the population. And again, we come back to the same thing every time. We need more people here at every level.
So what do you make of our tax regime in Dominica?
The tax regime is based again on population. It always comes back to the same thing. If you look at the actuarial increases for Social Security, for example, it's based on our population. Right now, working class people actually have a very favorable tax regime, but the small middle class and the corporate sector are paying more tax because they have to fill in the gap. And right now, our other biggest tax is VAT. And as we mentioned, Month-end, Creole Festival, Carnival, when there's a spike of people, Dominica is a incredibly buzzing commercial hive of activity, and then it dies down when everyone leaves. That just gives you a glimpse of what will happen if we have even 20,000 more people here on island, much less for 100,000 people.
No, we talk about population, both you and Sam. Sam went into the construction, you two been into construction. It has been said that construction is expensive. Again, it is based on the population. In terms of equity, would you say that?
Equity?
Yes. In
Let
terms.
me put it that way. Sir. Let me put it another way. In terms of skill set, in terms of carpentry, masons, and those things, in terms of skill set, Sam, in terms of the population skills, what are you noticing? What's happening?
That's an interesting question. Well, sentimentally, I lean towards local, but for me, it's a personal mission. Kenny, we talked about this outside in previous conversations. We certainly need, if we talk honestly about labor, we need to be honest about productivity. And training and developing of our workforce. And I think there is opportunity to improve in this area, quite frankly, to make us more competitive. I think when you figure 2/3 of the population may have left, a lot of those that are here may not be the most disciplined, may not be the most ready to work. I want to be very...
You're being coy, Sam.
I need to be very... I need to watch my words when
before they come on your
I
back.
say that before people think that I'm disparaging. But quite frankly, a lot of the population we have don't have the discipline, and we don't encourage that discipline in our society enough, I find, in terms of the young people. And I see that quite often. We create a sense of unrealistic expectations for people to get reward without putting in the hard effort. You have Carnival coming, you have your job. You got to show up to work, man. You got to show up to work like you would if you worked elsewhere. You're not on vacation. Or a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, being on time, being consistent. Those are the values that I don't think that we promote and push that enough to make our young people as competitive as they can be, certainly those that remain here. Now, when they leave and they go to other places, they work doubly hard. They're known as hardworking immigrants, but why can't we put that same effort when we do things in Dominica? And then how we do things. I don't know if sometimes we lack skills or we just lack commitment but we can often do things better than how we're doing it. So I think there's a lot of room for opportunity there, and I say this because I don't want to be unreasonable and unfair, because there are lots of young people also out here that do show promise, and I see that every day also.
Let's go to the telephone.
Yeah.
Yes, good evening, caller.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. Yes, I'm listening to you guys, and very interesting program, right? But the problem I have, here we are saying that the population is very small, but yet you guys are supporting that if the government give a young guy, a young woman, opportunity to go and study, I think they should come back. Because you go out there, you get an education, and you stay in the U.S. or wherever, and you develop that country, but yet your country is lack of people. So that I think the government should put things in place that when they finish their studies, that they could come back and get a good job. But I don't agree. That is just my take, that you should support them staying out there and then coming back 30, 40 years later. I don't think it's fair, because here we are saying we have a problem with people, not enough people, but yet people who stand out to study should stay out there. That is just my take.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you.
No,
can I touch on
yes.
his point? I agree with you 100%. But if some people, they meet someone out there and they start a relationship, or for some reason, and they decide to extend their study beyond and get an advanced degree and so on.
Or maybe get a very good opportunity.
Or very good. I don't think that they should be forced to come back. And it's a dangerous thing to force people to come back and they don't really want to be. You ever had someone, Cecil, that worked for you that they didn't want to be in the workplace?
Yes.
That can be
no production.
a horrible thing. And so that's what I'm just saying. We need to balance these things. And sir, I agree with you, encourage them, create the enabling environment for them to come back and welcome them back and help them to succeed. But if there are people who for some reason aren't ready to come back right after they get there.
But it's not an either or, Sam. It really isn't an either or. So when someone goes out to study, they're in a 5 to 7 year cycle. In between that time, the issue of needing people, if you have a policy approach, you have an RBI, people are coming, 150 families a year, that is alongside of your graduates being able to come back. Because as we mentioned before, unfortunately, a large amount of graduates come back looking for a job. What you really need is you need a strong percentage of them able to come back to create jobs by coming with new ideas and new approaches. But they too will need population to exercise those very business ideas that they have. Without that, they're going to be stuck.
I could go to the issue of taxation, and I could go to the issue of the same set of people that we are giving the monies out of the taxpayers should give some kind of contribution while they're out there. But let's go back to the telephone. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm listening to you, and this conversation is so interesting. I'm agreeing with all of you all on most points. I don't think we can force students to come back. Let them graduate, let them get some work experience, but put it in them as parents that they owe it to their country to give forward. I don't believe in giving back. My son has been given to the St. Mary's Academy for the last 7 years every month. And so if all of us encourage the children to realize that the government has assisted them to get the university degree and that they should give forward to their country. When a student in America gets a scholarship or gets to go to study, they don't go to ask the president for a job. And the world is a small place. and they should be given the opportunity to go wherever they find work. And we in Dominica need to be more inclusive of people that need to come to work. We need at least 30,000 more people on island. So I love that conversation, and we all have to help in whatever way we can. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, in all of this thing, we have not spoken about nightlife. We talk about tourism and so on. We have not spoken yet about nightlife. I know that we are a Christian family. What do we make of nightlife?
No. Wait a while, Cecil. What do you mean by nightlife? You mean people going to dance in the night?
Nah.
What are you talking about? You have to describe nightlife. What do you mean by that?
Everything that goes with nightlife.
We know at 11:10.
Everything.
What are you talking about when you talk about nightlife?
Everything that goes with nightlife. Everything that goes with nightlife.
So I see myself nightlife as going to a little club, gambling, playing pools, and I see another nightlife, which we can describe as a sex industry. What is that nightlife you're talking about? We have to define it. What are you saying?
I said everything inclusive, to include that of the sex industry.
Oh, so you're talking about
to include that of.
Right, but you know you're about 95% religious.
I know that, yes.
So what are you going to tell the church? What are you going to tell your pastor? What are you going to tell? Because you know already we have a nightlife here already. Mm-hmm. I will not call the name of that community, but there is a nightlife, underground nightlife already taking place on there. So whether you want to believe it or not, there is one here already. What you mean, expanding it? What?
Guys.
Well, I will defer to Kenny. I normally go to sleep at between 8 and 9. So anything that happens after that time, and certainly, Kenny, you might be a more expert in this matter.
I have no expertise in that area. Look, it comes on to it comes on to the same thing again. It's unfortunate we sound like a broken record. It's population. It comes back down to population. We spoke a while ago about the fact that Carnival, World Creole Festival, there's no better place in the world to be than in Dominica.
Yes.
The place is buzzing, there's activity, there's events everywhere, things are going on. But after 2 weeks, it's done.
But I can say this though, the visitors that I see that come in for ecotourism, they don't come for nightlife. I'll just put it there.
It's a different
we've tried night entertainment, even, at the hotel, and by the time they come from the boiling lake and come from hiking and come from kayaking and come from diving, they want to see their bed and they want to go to sleep. So there are different segments of the tourism market. The market that
and they complement each other.
Right. The market that I'm familiar with, they want, maybe they want another local place where they can get dinner that's a little different than the hotel. And we do encourage them to go to some places, Shewan and time in Sufri and Scott's Head and certain places like that. But the real nightlife for partying and any other such thing, that is not in my orbit, quite frankly.
Well, I can tell you, if we are
so I can speak to that.
If we are speaking about an international airport, we have to definitely prepare ourselves for those types.
But I think, again, Cecil, when we talk about development, this is why I asked, where are we going? If we're talking about ecotourism and making this island an eco-island, it's not going to be a gambling mecca. It's not going to, so we need to decide. We can't be something, for everyone. I'm not suggesting that we can't have some level of nightlife. People are here, they want to go partying one night or whatever. But I think we just need to determine as a jurisdiction where we're focusing, and maybe that will help guide people, whether it's investors or whatever, to see what the opportunities are in that area. But I think if you talk about going on nature, ecotourism, there isn't too much demand for nightlife in that type of tourism. Huh?
Kenny, you agree?
No, I mean it's a balance. The person who comes for World Creole and the person who goes hiking is a different person. Correct. You might find, for example, the French people who come, a lot for them who come for the World Creole or some who come for Asa Banter's event
They
during
want
the summer.
nightlife. Yeah.
You know, they may do some camping, they may do some stuff around that, but it's a different type of people. But
Well, how often in the 365 days of the year are we talking about these people being on island, and what kind of business can they sustain? If you talk about Creole Festival, 3 nights of pulsating rhythm, let's put 2 days in between, that's 5 days. You know, Carnival and what else? I think the bread and butter are people that come steady and come all the time, use our trails, you go to the restaurants and so on and so forth.
Sam, I would tell you that we haven't touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to event-driven tourism. Same as you would say the same for eco.
But we don't have accommodations for that.
Yeah,
for them.
yeah. You don't. You just don't.
We don't have those facilities for them.
But
So-
Sam, I will tell you, I just recently I came from St. Lucia about 4 weeks ago, and at the Rodney's Bay area. I mean, every night, you know, you had a place to go, and you can say I'm a retiree, but I found myself having to visit a few areas at night.
So let me clarify. There is scope for, like you see at Rodney Bay, they have, you know, every Friday night in Grosy Lane, you have a local experience where you can try local dishes and there's some local music and so on. I don't know if I would call it is a nighttime, but that is a subdued version of, I think, what you and Hartly were speaking about, and there is, you know, scope for that at some level.
There's space for that.
Yeah, at some level there is space for that. You're correct.
So a strong part of that is investment. So all of these in Rodney Bay, you have a marina. Around the marina, you have restaurants because you have lots of tourists.
Right.
All right. The same goes if you go to the Gap in Barbados.
Barbados.
You know, where we started off with showing that the difference between Dominica and the other islands was that since the 90s, all of the other islands have had superior airlift. All right. And because of that, our tourism product has been undeveloped compared to theirs. All right. It's different. I know Samuel says it's very different because we're dealing with a different type of tourist. But at the same time, in terms of the numbers, as I said, when you go to St. Lucia now talking about the need that they need 5,000 hotel rooms. You know, we're looking to get 2,000. You know, so
we're a good ways from 2,000.
Yes.
Still. Yes.
So we're still a good ways from 2,000, and they're looking to do 5,000. We're just at a different stage. You know, you could say that there's more potential in our project because we have less build out. They've built out most of their sector. So nightlife.
So we have to start doing the infrastructure. Basically,
Yes.
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but the infrastructure, it's kind of a chicken and egg. The infrastructure will come closer to when, you know, viable contracts are signed, agreements are signed with car airlift, and people can see now, you know, you're going to get 500-600 people coming in a week. Then the investors will follow to put down infrastructure. That's how it always works.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
Yes, I like how Sam and Kenny have been able to speak to us on the issue of the cost of development, and we realize that going back from the Second World War, small countries, small economies are actually suffering in terms of the metropolitan and how they can squeeze us and have us in their own corners.
But I want to throw a spoke in the wheel. In terms of development, there is always a cost in terms of development. And we're seeing it playing out right now in Dominica, especially when you have to use certain resources, especially movement, because remember, Dominica is a mountainous island. We're not like St. Kitts, we're not like Barbados, we're not like Antigua. And persons are talking about preservation of rivers. People are talking about sustaining their rivers. They don't want their rivers to get dirty. They don't want their mountains to be touched. How do you expect us to develop when we want international airport? We want all what the other islands have. We want to be competing with them. We want more hotel rooms. We want more people to come. How are we going to navigate around that? How do we navigate? Because you see what's happening around us. We read the news. I see it in the newspaper. I hear it in the discussions taking place. And how do we navigate? We want those things, but we're not ready to bring more people in terms of people. We don't want people to take them, and we don't want to damage our mountains and our rivers. What do we do? How do we navigate? Sam is for you.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with that question, and I will answer the question. I may not give you the answer that you or anybody else want, because I speak for myself when I speak on this. And in particular, the issue, I think, is in Bois Blanc.
Yeah, Bois.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a controversy now about a quarrying operation to use the boulders to advance the development of the airport. I think we spoke to the airport, we spoke to this issue already. I can tell you, I witnessed something that I found a little challenging when I came back from a trip. Most of the month of October I was away, and it was raining, and I saw the runoff going across the road to the river, and I saw things with my eyes, and I heard my visitors that stayed with us speaking about what they saw. So this is not something someone else said. And I was concerned about it, to be honest with you, and I made contact with the Prime Minister directly, and I made contact with the parliamentary representative from the Kalinago territory with respect to that, and expressed concerns that I had from a ecotourism standpoint. Because remember, we're holding ourselves out as a nature island, and we must behave and like nature islanders in the way we do things. Subsequent to that, I guess a number of people contacted the Prime Minister, because he wouldn't have acted on, just based on the issues that I raised. I think it's a good move that he made to suspend the operation there, pending further review, pending consultation, pending, I do think also, again, I'm not criticizing, I'm just stating, I'm not here to criticize or one way or the other, but to try to be as honest as possible. I do think that the issue could have been handled better on the onset with better consultation and discussions, quite frankly, with the community. You're not going to get 100% buy-in. You never do. But I think it's easier to get some more sufficient consensus if there is more discussion and consultation beforehand. And I think that's an opportunity, that we have now going forward to say lessons learned. What do we learn when something doesn't go well? Do we get frustrated and angry, or do we say, so maybe next time we'll do it a little differently? So I think we learn a lesson from that. As I said earlier, the hope, he said, when he suspended it was for review, and I suspect they've been reviewing and evaluating and seeing if there were alternatives, or if it was to be done, how could it be done in a way to minimize the adverse impact on the environment. I did stop at the site when I got back on island a few days ago. I think I got back on Tuesday. So that's the first place I stopped, because it's a big issue, and I wanted to see for myself. I saw that there is some attempt to regreen. They've put some retention, and they're seeking to do some things. I know also that they had been looking at the possibility of other sites. I don't know the entire, in order for me to say yes, no, black, white, I would need to have all the facts in front of me, and I don't. But I'd say, hopefully they can find the way to do it in which they have the minimal adverse impact in Dominica, and that's all I can ask. We need the international airport. As I suggested earlier, it would be quite unfortunate if we scarred Wesley and we're unable to complete that airport, and we need it for economic development. At the same time, when we develop, we talk about the cost. We need to ensure that we have minimal damage to the natural environment. We can't have zero damage to the natural environment. So going forward, I'm still waiting. I don't want to say anything that could be, that could go one way or the other. I'm still waiting. The quarrying has stopped, and so it's a point of observation and waiting to see if whatever the decision that's made, the same way the Prime Minister made a statement and he let us know that he was suspending, he let the island know that he was suspending. I think, there needs to be another address and to tell the people what has happened since then, and therefore the decision has been made that they found an alternate site, or therefore the decision has been made to utilize that site, and that these mitigating factors are going to be added to the equation, where we can berm and reduce the sedimentation in the river, or whatever, and this is our plan for it, and this is the time period in which we expect to use it. Maybe we find alternate someplace else, and afterwards we're going to ensure that we will restore it back as much as possible to the original state. So this is the conversation that I think that needs to be had, because in my space it's not an abstract conversation. I deal with people every day that only come to the island because of the natural environment and because of the perception that we preserve our natural environment. And you got to give people like me and people out there that really, love the environment, that, you have to kind of come and meet us at least a certain halfway on this. And so I think there's room for dialogue. I don't believe in absolutes. The people were, the Prime Minister and the government, they were elected by the people. I wasn't to make those decisions. I'll be guided by their decision. I will respect the decision. And whatever that decision is, let's work together to see how we can minimize the adverse damage going forward. So that's my position. It's a long answer, because it's not for me a hot, cold, a simple, because this is a serious matter for me and for those people that's out there. And I think somehow on either side we've turned it into this political thing, and it shouldn't be a political thing. It should be, I think there are earnest people who spoke. Some of the young people, Janelle Breastbrain that I know, Gary, these are people earnestly who are only concerned about the environment, and they don't mean, it's not a political thing for them. And a lot of people that have spoken, sometimes we like to, before someone says something, we ascribe, some political or some negative thing. Let's start listening to what people say and not who said it, or try to, to try to put a taint on it because it comes from a certain place. Because I know I'm speaking, strictly from my heart on this thing. And I certainly hope that we find, a good solution, and let's work around it, because we have the urgency to do this airport. You have global, situation where decisions are being made that have a significant adverse impact, and we don't have the benefit of time. We like can't sit it down. No, but so we don't have the benefit of time. So whatever it is, let us see how we can minimize. And this is not just a one-off issue. Let's treat the environment not just as this particular issue, but in a comprehensive way, and let us seek to preserve the environment in a comprehensive way. Going forward. So I'm glad to see the activism. I hope it doesn't stop with this issue. I hope it continues with all issues going forward.
Someone said we may protect the environment by our own actions, but trust me, it will be damaged by an act of nature.
Well, let the act of nature damage it, Cecil. That we don't have control over. But I think we as humans need to ensure that we have minimal adverse impact, and let us at least agree on that.
I cut my hair and my hair will grow.
So my viewpoint is slightly different from yours, but I guess we're pretty aligned anyway. Dominica has, outside of Guyana, the largest protected forest reserve in the Caribbean. We've protected more of our landmass, even with the developments that have been going on, than any other country in the Caribbean. And we have to be recognized for that. And that has spanned all of our governments. The development that is taking place right now, whether it is the marina in Portsmouth, whether it is the cable car and the airport, all are going to have effects on the environment of Dominica, on the landscape of Dominica. There was a debate about the Kempinski back then because it was in the wetlands. And this is an ongoing challenge that you're going to have for a small country like Dominica. If you were to right now go and Google JFK an environmentalist, or Gatwick an environmentalist, or Heathrow an environmentalist, you'll find that in every case when these airports even try to expand, they've had lawsuits put up against them. I think we have to stop seeing disagreements as being terminal towards any particular project. There's always room for compromise. If someone disagrees with me about something, it doesn't mean that there is no room for moving forward. Sam accurately pointed out that there are two separate issues with this stuff, with the site that you're talking about, or that was referred to. There is the short-term impact on the people downstream from the project, and then there's the long-term effect of the quarrying on the site. The short-term effect, as you said, could be mitigating by using berms or what other methods that could reduce the sedimentation. If anyone knows that if it even rains heavily in Dominica, you will find that wherever there's a surplus of earth, you'll find that the river gets muddied, it gets sedimentation, etc. But the bigger issue about whether the cost of development is worth the increased viability of the project, that is a question that has to be dealt with back and forth between the parties, and a compromise has to be had. I don't think that it's an either or question. Both can happen. The bigger question that you've raised is the time. Time is of essence, because we are facing a world in which the financing of this project is getting a smaller and smaller window.
And the construction.
Mm-hmm. And so we don't have the comfort sitting where we are to say, well, we have to stop this project for X amount of time so we can try and figure out whether we can do X or do Y. A decision has to be made. And as you know, I know you're a big fan of Paul Kagame in Rwanda. Strength requires decisions that are not so much about right now, but what's next.
But I would say what concerns me is the sentiment of, Cecil, this person wrote. I'm hearing nature is going to create damage, so why should we even care about protecting the environment? That's what I'm hearing from that sentiment.
But hear what someone asks you, Sam.
But that I hear that from that, and that's very problematic.
Hear what someone asks you.
That's
but Sam, listen to that, Sam. Someone asked, but Sam, you had a lot to cut in the hills. What are you saying about this?
Like I said, there's no zero impact development. I said that initially in the program. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's always some compromise and a trade-off. I agree with that. But it's something that we have to be very thoughtful and considerate about. And it's not something that we can handle cavalierly. And that's basically, if I can, put what I'm saying into a bracket, that's what I'm saying.
Let's take a last call quickly. When you're ready to go, that's when everybody want to call. Good evening to you, caller.
Yes. I had to call back. Based on what Mr. Raphael just expressed, education is key. And I am a Dominican, and all those born in Dominica, we call ourselves Dominicans. There's a saying, in order for development to take place, there must be a degree of suffering. Collaboration is another key word, and Mr. Raphael doesn't have to express himself on radio all over again, talking about people have to collab. We have educated minds, and most of the people that are talking about quarrying, correlating, There is too much division, hatred, envy, and jealousy in this country. We need love, we need peace, we need unity. And anything that is for Dominica is for all Dominicans, even those we hope to be alive in the next decade. So whatever is for Dominica is for Dominica. And I don't care what people have to say, we need an international effort. Because there's too much hustle and suffering when you try to get to Dominica. And a lot of people don't like coming to Dominica because of that transitory position. You have to stop from a big airplane to a smaller airplane. They don't enjoy that sort of situation. We have to look for progression, not retrogress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Hartly, you would have remembered the Woodbridge Bay, where we presently we presently have this road going from the public works onto the present road, getting into Woodbridge Bay. There, where the road is, there was a mountain. If you remember, those of us would remember, before the seaport was built, and they had to do some backfilling, and they had to break that huge mountain there. And today it's there many years later. From 1971, many years later, we're not even so sure there was a mountain.
And the reason, you see, you have to understand, and I like the both interventions by Sam and my friend Kenny. He's an environmentalist. Sam is a man who thrives on the environment. He talks about ecotourism, and you can see it. I visit his place many times, and I can see he works with the environment.
That's true.
And so I can understand, and we have many like him on the island, people who like nature. We like nature. I like the rivers. I like being in Dominica. I like the whole thing. So there's always a discussion, and that's why I raised the issue about sustainability, a balance between the environment and development. And so you'll have two schools of thought, but I always believe in dialogue. And Kenny raised the issue of time. Can we afford to wait? Because the longer we wait, we'll not be able to do it because of the cost and changing environments, because nothing remains constant. So I like the discussion. I found it very interesting.
Okay, so as we come to the end, guys, we have to end sometime. All good things must end. Very good education. Different Lakou program tonight, talking about Dominica and its development, the cost of its development. I would like to ask Sam to give us his closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Cecil and Adams, for inviting me and inviting Kenny. I guess he'll say his piece. And thank you to your listening audience for listening and for participating in the conversation. Hopefully there is some food for thought in our discussion tonight, that, even if maybe some public education and sensitization on things like on tourism, on agriculture, on population and the economy. And as you see, issues of development, we touched on many, many things. I'm just happy that you gave me, the invitation and the opportunity to come and share with our fellow Dominicans. And you're correct, Adams, we need to keep conversations going, and we need to educate each other. And you only learn from people that don't agree with you. You don't learn, there's nothing to be learned. The ones that agree with you, they have nothing they can teach you, because you already think like they do. And so it's important to discuss things, issues with people who may be, and don't lock yourself into your position. Try to listen to what other people have to say. You'll sure have something to learn from it. And I think that's why we have these sometimes discussions and debates in a very civil way, but it has to be done in a respectful way. And as we discuss and debate this in this studio, hopefully in Dominica we can also have these discussions and debates in a civil way. And at the end, we all agree, we all love this country. We may find that we may suggest different paths to getting to what we think is best for the island, but it's because we love the island passionately. So let us continue to do what we can to help to promote Dominica in our own way. And again, thanks again so much to you and your audience for allowing me to participate in this program.
Thank you. Kenny?
Thank you, Cecil. Thank you, Hartley. It's been a great discussion. thank you for the listeners and the people who contributed. Dominica remains our own little jewel, and we have to polish it. We can leave it as it is, but if it doesn't shine, then the rest of the world and other people don't get to see what we see and experience. And so let's keep on shining it. And as Sam said, it makes sense to have discussions with people who have different points of view and who have different ideas, so that you can understand what else is out there in terms of thought processes, because we can only learn even in disagreement. Okay, so thank you very much.
Well, the topic sentence came to the end. When I was a teacher, you can have the topic sentence at the middle, at the top, or at the end. And that is the cost of development. That is the cost of development. Cecil, it was a pleasure being with you tonight. It was a very, very educational discussion. I look forward to another one like that. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Kenny and Sam, and for bringing forward so much food for thought. I'm sure that it will be a talking point in the morning to understand how Dominica itself has been challenged, going back as far back as the Second World War, and how we have found ourselves navigating through the steep waters and choppy waters itself, but we are still afloat, and that's what's important. We will make mistakes, we will also make success, but it's how do we make our mistakes? Do we make our mistakes and go 10 steps back and 1 step forward? That's not really true development. But if as a people we come together, I can guarantee you will remember the things that Sam and Kenny said tonight, and we'll take Dominica and propel it very well for the next generation to come. Just want to say thank you to all the folks that were listening, the folks who were on social media with us. I just want to say next week we'll take a break because we'll be having again the continuation of Carnival. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be with you next time on Tuesday evening on Calypso Pulse. One love. Just continue doing the best for your beautiful country, Dominica.
In Ukraine, because even by the fact that he is this prominent archaeologist who travels freely around Europe, talks about his work, is being listened to, is being invited, is being respected by his European colleagues, all the while digging in occupied territory. In the Ukraine